Chapter 766. Ning Xuema quickly steadied herself and waited for her heartbeat to calm down before turning to look at him. She saw the overlord lying on his back with his clothes wide open. His forehead was full of sweat, but his face was pale. Cold? He spat out a word. Brother, that cloud bed could freeze a person into a lump of ice. Of course it was cold. A normal person like her wouldn't be able to stand it, let alone a seriously ill person like him. Looking at his body shivering, Ning Xuema forgot the awkwardness of the kiss and hurriedly went forward to carry him down from the cloud bed. She didn't have a place to put him down, but she couldn't put him on the ground. She saw a few cloud-like praying mats not far away, so she pulled them over with her legs and arranged them together. Then she put him on the praying mats. When she lowered her head and saw his clothes were wide open, her heart skipped a beat. She quickly gathered his clothes and wrapped them tightly around him again. The Almighty looked like a real Almighty when his clothes were tightly buttoned up. His current appearance didn't feel like him at all. Finally, Ning Xuema tidied him up. Suddenly she felt that her chest was leaking air. She looked down and her face became hot. Her lapel was also wide open. It revealed the light pink doo-doo inside. Even the doo-doo had fallen off halfway, revealing more than half of her chest. She finally remembered the passionate kiss just now. Her face became hot again. It turned out that the Almighty knew how to be a hooligan even when he was unconscious. Sure enough, a man's instincts didn't need to be taught. Was it really his first time being intimate with a woman? It didn't feel like it was his first time. That technique, that kiss, it was so familiar as if he knew where her sensitive spots were. Thinking of that kiss, that gentle and strong touch, her heart, which had just calmed down, started to beat wildly again. She shook her head violently. She couldn't think about it anymore. Although Ning Xuema was smart, it was her first time being so intimate with a man, so she couldn't figure out if the man was unfamiliar or familiar with it. She looked at the cloud bed with lingering fear. If it wasn't for the cold bed that woke her up instantly, she might have hit a home run with him and given herself to him in a daze. Even if he wanted to give it to him, he had to do it when he was sober, right? Otherwise, if he ate it, he might not admit it after he woke up. Why did he think of this? Crazy. I'm probably too tired. I'm a little crazy. His imagination was wild and unconstrained, and his imagination ran wild. She patted her head and looked at her image. She couldn't help but want to rub her forehead. Too open. She was simply too open right now. If someone were to see this, they might even label her as a slut. If he saw it when he was awake, she was afraid that he would say that she was frivolous again. Damn it. Why did she think of him again? Ning Xuema hurriedly dressed herself up and put on the doo-doo again. She was still not used to wearing it, and she always felt that it was not as comfortable as underwear. However, she only had this set of clothes now, so she could only make do with it. She buttoned her clothes tightly to make herself look like a well-behaved lady. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with her body, she let out a long sigh of relief. When she turned back to look at Dizun, she couldn't help but moan. Oh my god. He had a high fever again. Xuema touched his forehead and felt that he was about to spontaneously combust from the heat. Chapter 767. With such a high fever, even if the fever subsided, a normal person would become a fool. Perhaps the cloud bed was the key to deal with his high fever. Ning Xuema had no choice but to carry him onto the cloud bed again. In the process of hugging him, she felt as if she was hugging a big stove. The places that came into contact with her skin were burning hot. After placing him on the cloud bed, she continued to rub his body to lower his temperature. Half an hour later, his body temperature finally dropped by quite a bit. Although it was still hot, it was the temperature of a normal person. There was no thermometer in this era, but Ning Xuema was still very sensitive to temperature. His fever should have reached 50 degrees. It was not the temperature of a human. Now that the fever had subsided, it was about 39 degrees. She heaved a sigh of relief and felt her waist and back ache. Taking care of a patient was really not an easy job. Xuema felt that taking care of him for 4 hours was more tiring than standing on the operating table for 4 hours. Most importantly, it was the mental exhaustion. After another 2 hours of physical cooling, his temperature finally dropped to the temperature of a normal person, and he became much quieter. He lay on the cloud bed like a sleeping beauty. Ning Xuema sat on the futon next to her and did not want to get up again. She was tired and hungry and she could not find any food. Seeing that he had calmed down, she decided to meditate. Firstly, she wanted to recover her strength, and secondly, she wanted to resist the hunger. However, she did not meditate for long before she heard the sound of teeth chattering. She turned around and almost collapsed. The old Dizun's face was pale, and his body was trembling slightly. A layer of frost seemed to have formed on his forehead. Ning Xuema reached out and touched it. The coldness was comparable to that of a dead person. Cold, cold? He murmured. Could it be that this sudden change in temperature was due to malaria? Ning Xuema had no choice but to carry him down. He was still shivering on the praying mat, and his face was getting paler and paler. If not for him breathing and occasionally murmuring based on his body temperature, Ning Xuema would have thought that he was already a corpse. He kept saying that he was cold. Although the castle was magnificent and dreamy like a fairy tale, she could not find a quilt. There wasn't even a piece of cloth. Ning Xuema walked around in circles, but she couldn't find anything to keep him warm. He was so cold that he almost curled up. She couldn't bear it. Steeling her heart, she pulled his arm away and burrowed into his embrace. That feeling was like drilling into a lump of ice, causing her to shiver continuously. Perhaps because he could feel her temperature, he immediately hugged her tightly with his arms and even wrapped his legs around hers, as if he wanted to use every inch of their bodies to absorb her heat. Ning Xuema was cold. She was really cold. It was so cold that her teeth began to chatter. The ancestor seemed to have sensed her trembling in a daze. His body slightly stiffened and his arms released her. He even gave her a push and forced out a word, "Go." Ning Xuema was speechless. She was pushed out of the ancestor's embrace, so naturally she wasn't that cold. Xuema lay next to him in a daze for a moment. She saw that his thin lips were tightly pursed and covered with a layer of frost. His fingers were tightly clenched and his fingertips were pale. It was obvious that he was trying to restrain the bone-chilling cold. Did he regain some of his consciousness? Did he just push her aside after regaining his consciousness? Ning Xuema suddenly became angry. Without saying anything further, she forcefully pulled his arm away and squeezed into his embrace. She used her arms to hug his waist and wrapped her legs around his legs. She fiercely said, "You better behave yourself." Chapter 768. The Dizun Emperor's body stiffened. Her body was really warm like a warm little stove. The Dizun Emperor, who felt like he had fallen into an ice cave, couldn't help but desperately want to hug her tightly. But he couldn't. His body was so cold, if he touched her too much, he would freeze her. Her body was still too weak right now. Although he desperately wanted her to take the initiative to hug him, he couldn't. He forced himself to hold on to his last bit of consciousness, and a faint white light burst out from his body. Ning Xuema was bounced out by his protective barrier and rolled to the side. She shivered and jumped up, looking at him who was curled up in the white light. At this time he was still rejecting her? More and more white frost appeared on his body, gradually covering his whole body. This made Ning Xuema inexplicably panic. She wanted to rush over, but she couldn't break through his protective barrier. Xuemo remembered that when he was surrounded by the pack of wolves, he also had a protective barrier around his body. So many wolves were unable to bite through it, but when she went to his side to hug him, his protective barrier automatically disappeared, so she didn't feel any obstruction at all. Now that his protective barrier had been released, it prevented anyone from approaching. She could only watch as his body turned from frost to ice. In the end he became an ice man. His entire body seemed to be frozen in ice and there was no movement at all. Was he still alive? He was in that ice shell, so she couldn't sense whether he was breathing or heartbeat. She sat on the side in a daze, looking at him without blinking, the panic in her heart suddenly overwhelming. You wouldn't just die like this, right? Originally, when she was in danger, she couldn't help but think of him, subconsciously using him as a protective umbrella. Now that he was in a life-and-death situation, she couldn't do anything. She actually couldn't do anything. She clenched her fingers tightly, once again hating her own weakness, once again hating her own powerlessness. She touched his protective barrier again. That layer of faint white light was still there. She didn't dare to break it for fear of increasing his burden. With this barrier he should be alive, right? After all, he wasn't a mortal but a great god. If others were frozen in this ice shell, they would most likely die. He shouldn't. Could it be that those ghost-faced trees were his nemesis? They could easily injure him? Otherwise, how could he be so weak? Ning Xuema sat in the same place, puzzled, but no one could answer the question in her heart. She could only guard him, protect him. She contacted Kirin and asked if it had found a way out. Kirin's answer was that it was looking. This meant that it wasn't easy to get out of the dark forest. She wanted to let Kirin go to find someone to report, but her hope's his hope. As time passed, the sky above his head gradually darkened. Stars appeared one by one and gradually covered the entire sky. They twinkled like diamonds scattered all over the sky. The stars was Hope Eyes. The luminous pearl in the hall that looked like a small moon gradually lit up. The floor clearly reflected the shadows of the stars in the sky, as if it was another starry sky. The starry sky above and below reflected each other. This scene could not be described with just one word. This scenery was originally a beautiful scenery. But as Ning Xuema sat there, she felt an indescribable loneliness and desolation. Chapter 769. In such a quiet night, so what if the starry sky was beautiful? If there was no one to admire it with, it would also be empty. She focused all her attention on the ice shell, afraid that it would suddenly explode, and the people inside would also be blasted away. She was also afraid that the ice shell would not move and remain frozen until the end of time. During this period, she tried to warm him with the rejuvenation technique she had just learned, but it was bounced back by his protective white light. In the end, she simply did not try anything. If his soul dissipated here, she would also starve to death here, so she could accompany him. Master, how is the D-Zune? Do you want to eat something? There are not only wolves here but also wild boars. They are not small and they have a fierce temper. But they are no match for me. Ah, master, I bit off their legs. Don't you like to eat wild boar's legs? Do you want me to send them to roast and eat? Kirin's voice was tired, but more than that, it was full of joy after killing so many people. It would not be able to send them over. That water area was a natural moat. Ning Xuema transmitted her voice back. You eat by yourself and continue to work hard. We have other things to eat, so don't worry. She could not tell the truth in case Kirin was worried. After you are full, go and explore the way out. She would not let go of even the slightest hope. Okay. Kirin agreed happily, but it was still puzzled. Master, the D-Zune should be familiar with the terrain here, right? He did not say where the exit is? He is meditating, so we can't disturb him. You go and explore, Ning Xuema ordered. Little Qilin agreed and continued to be busy with its work. Ning Xuema sat alone for a moment, then suddenly remembered the voice transmission talisman that Yelu Jing and gave her. She quickly took it out and was about to open it. Suddenly, she remembered that the D-Zune had too many secrets, many of which his disciples did not know. If she blindly called him over, she was afraid that it would be inappropriate. Besides, even Yelu Jing and could not cross that water area, so it would be futile for him to come. He might even expose another secret of the great god. Her thoughts turned to Rongyue Tenlon, and her heart was moved. That person's medical skills were amazing, and his cultivation should not be too far off from D-Zune's. Perhaps if he came, there would be a way. She didn't have a sound-transmitting talisman to contact Rongyue Tianlon, so she simply called Yelu Jing in. She wanted to ask him if he could contact Rongyue Tianlon. Unexpectedly, the sound-transmitting talisman did not light up at all. Could it be that there was a barrier here? Could it block the signal of the voice transmission talisman? Fuck, is this a signal blind spot? Ning Xuema turned the directed audio talisman over and over again for a long time, but there was still no response. Just like how there was no signal in the mountainous area, there was no signal in the directed audio talisman here either. She was hungry and tired. Originally, she wanted to keep staring at the ancestor, but she fell asleep in a daze. She dreamt of a dream. Green hills and clear waters. High and low mountain peaks were scattered all around in picturesque disorder. Ning Xuema walked among them, and her heart was a little absent-minded. She did not know why she was here. In front of her, there was a clump of waist-high grass that made a low panting sound. Ning Xuema curiously walked over, and when she saw what was inside, she was stunned. Nestled inside was a snow-white fur ball that was half stained with blood. It was a little fox with 8 long furry tails behind it. Chapter 770. 8-tailed fox. And it was a very beautiful 8-tailed fox. The fur on its body was like it was made of snow, it was very bright. The only regret was that there was a wound on its back that was so deep that one could see the bone. Fresh blood flowed all over its body. This wound was somewhat fatal. It opened its small mouth slightly and breathed rapidly. Its small belly rose and fell as it panted heavily. Ning Xuema's heart was shocked as she had a strange feeling of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. 8-tailed fox, could it be the legendary Greenhill Fox clan? Ning Xuema had read many stories about 9-tailed foxes in the modern era and had a good impression of this kind of creature. Now that she saw this 8-tailed fox being seriously injured, her heart was filled with compassion. She couldn't help wanting to push aside the grass in front of her and walk over. But her fingers passed through the grass and she couldn't touch the grass at all. She stared blankly for a moment. Was the scenery here fake or was she fake? She steeled her heart and approached the fox again, but the fox ignored her. When Ning Xuema bent down to pick it up, her fingers passed through its body again. She took 2 steps back and looked at her hand. She vaguely understood that she was fake. She could see the things in this world but she couldn't touch them. She wanted to leave this place but she was worried about this injured fox. Such a beautiful little thing, what if it was caught by a hunter? The sound of a flute suddenly came from the mountain in front of her. The sound of the flute was very pleasant to listen to. It was as smooth as flowing water and as cold as ice water. It made people feel refreshed when they heard it. The injured little fox's body trembled as its 2 little ears stood up. It suddenly stood up shakily from the grass and ran in the direction of the flute sound. Ning Xuema couldn't help but follow behind it. The little fox's injuries weren't treated in time and its blood was spilled all over the ground. It was like a blooming plum blossom on the ground. It had a kind of sad beauty. Ning Xuema followed the fox. She was afraid that it would fall down in the middle of the journey. Not bad, the little fox was very persistent. Although it stumbled along the way, it still managed to reach there. There were already many birds and beasts, herbivores and carnivores mixed together. They were all staring in the same direction, and each of them had an intoxicated expression on their faces. Ning Xuema also looked in the direction they were staring at, and her heart skipped a beat. A venerable sovereign? A white-clothed man was sitting on top of a strange mountain peak. His white clothes were like flowing clouds in the sky, his body was like the snow on the peak of the mountain, and his hair was like a waterfall. He was cold and indifferent, like a god overlooking all living things. He didn't seem to be wearing a mask, but Ning Xuema couldn't see his face clearly even though she tried her best. It must have been separated by some kind of spell. The man was playing a jade flute in his hand. The heavenly wind lifted his sleeves, making them flutter like a butterfly spreading its wings. The man's expression was focused as if he didn't care about anything. The sound of his flute caused hundreds of birds to circle in the sky and the beasts to sway on the ground, as if they were dancing to the sound of his flute. When the song ended, the man slowly stood up. It was obvious that he did not want to play anymore. Only then did the birds and beasts reluctantly disperse. The little fox seemed to have specially come to listen to the song. When the man in white finished playing, it also wanted to turn around and leave. But it had lost too much blood. As soon as it turned around, it staggered and fell down. The little fox whimpered twice and struggled a few times on the ground. It wanted to get up, but it didn't succeed. Chapter 771. A white robe appeared in front of Ning Xuema's eyes. She didn't know when the man had come down from the mountain and was walking towards the little fox. Her heart couldn't help but jump. The man would extend a helping hand to the little fox, right? After all, the little fox had suffered such a serious injury and still came to listen to his music. It could be said that it was half a soulmate to him. Moreover, the little fox looked so cute. The white robe floated across the grass and a corner of the robe even touched the little fox's head. But the man didn't stop walking. He actually didn't stop. Ning Xuema clenched her fist. How cold-blooded. Too cold-blooded. Woo-ah. The little fox also cried out in a low voice from the grass. Its pair of gem-like black eyes looked at the man's back as he quietly left and lowered its head. It closed its eyes and panted for a while before it turned around and slowly walked in another direction. It walked very slowly and Ning Xuema followed it. She felt that her point of view was the little fox's point of view. Whatever it saw, she saw. Suddenly, the little fox staggered and fell to the ground and fainted. Even Ning Xuema's vision turned black. When the darkness in front of her dispersed, Ning Xuema found that she had changed to another place. In front of her was a bonfire and beside the bonfire, the man in white was sitting on a green rock. In his hand was the 8-tailed little fox. The little fox's 4 little claws were in front of its chest. When it was picked up by the man, it opened its eyes in a daze. When it saw the man in white's face, its eyes lit up and it stretched out its little claws to hook the man's sleeve. The man held it in his hand and looked at it for a moment. The light-colored corners of his lips seemed to curl up slightly. I have eaten a lot of meat but I have never eaten fox meat. I don't know what it tastes like. Although this little fox is a little thin, perhaps the lean meat will be more chewy. He looked at it as if he was looking at a wild rabbit. The little fox's body stiffened and suddenly struggled vigorously in his hand. The man seemed to be caught off guard and was thrown to the ground by it. The little fox rolled on the ground and immediately jumped up, turned around and ran away. Fearing that the man would eat it, it waved its little claws and released a faint red light, attacking the man. The man flicked his sleeve and the faint red light disappeared. He waved his hand again and the little fox, which had just run 30 to 40 feet away, automatically flew back into his hand. You know some Yao arts? The male picked it up in front of his eyes. Then do you know how to speak? The little fox closed its eyes and pretended to be dead. Looks like it hasn't gained sentience yet. I can finally eat fox meat. The man's voice was faint, but it was as if he had just sentenced the little fox to death. The man stretched out his hand and a gleaming blade appeared in his palm. He gestured at the little fox's body, as if he was looking for a place to place the blade. The little fox was finally scared. She suddenly opened her mouth and said, "Fox meat isn't tasty, it's sour." Her voice was tender and tender with a hint of a child's voice. The man seemed a little regretful, but he was still unmoved. The meat is sour, but the fur is not bad. Perhaps I can peel off this skin to make a sleeve? Was it going to be skinned? The little fox's body stiffened again. Seeing the blade in the man's hand waving in front of it, the little fox suddenly raised its little claws and slashed at its own body. Chapter 772. Its claws were as sharp as knives. If it really scratched its body, there would definitely be several cuts on its fur. The man seemed to have guessed the little fox's thoughts. He raised his finger and pressed down on its little claws. Self-mutilation. The little fox couldn't move anymore. It stared at the man in front of it, and its beautiful eyes finally became misty. My fur isn't perfect anymore. There are a few holes in it. I can't make a sleeve and it won't look good even if I make one. Oh, that's true. The man's gaze fell on its body. There was indeed a large tear on its left side and blood was still seeping out. You've been injured for 2 hours, right? Since you've gained sentience, why don't you heal yourself? The man's voice sounded slightly displeased. The little fox said, I'm seriously injured. I can't transform so I can't heal myself. There seemed to be a glimmer of hope in its eyes. My fur is broken so it's no longer perfect. You won't skin me anymore, right? I really don't like things with imperfections. The man's voice sounded regretful. Then I won't skin you. The little fox's eyes lit up. It struggled in his hands. Then put me down. Sure enough, the man placed it on the blue stone, but he had no intention of letting it go. He took out a crimson medicine bottle from somewhere and slowly applied the medicine to it while saying, I can cure you now. When all the fur is as smooth as before, I'll peel it off. The little fox froze. Even Ning Xuema, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but burst out laughing. She could already tell that the man was teasing the little fox. The little fox's eyes were watery, and its little mouth was tightly pursed. It seemed like it didn't know what to say. The man was very skilled at healing, and the medicine was also very effective. Almost at the same time, the wound stopped bleeding. He took out a roll of bandages from nowhere and wrapped the little fox's wound tightly. When he put it on the ground, the little fox almost couldn't run anymore. Its hind legs were also bandaged. It probably thought that it wouldn't be in danger for the time being, so it simply lay down beside the man and stared blankly at the crackling bonfire. The man ignored it. With a flick of his wrist, a guqin appeared on his knees and he began to play. The little fox's eyes lit up as she stared at his zither. She didn't even blink as she watched his fingers play the zither. The sound of the zither was unprecedentedly beautiful. The beautiful sound of the zither gradually summoned hundreds of birds and beasts. Ning Xuema was also somewhat entranced. This man's musical talent was extremely high. Regardless of whether it was the flute or the zither, he could play them to perfection. It was definitely not an exaggeration to say that he would be remembered for 3 days. After an unknown amount of time, the sound of the zither finally stopped, and the birds and beasts reluctantly dispersed. The little fox also stood up reluctantly. It had been so engrossed in listening and learning that it had forgotten about its injuries. Only now did it realize that the bandages on its body had disappeared and its injuries were completely healed. Its fur was smooth and the deep lacerations left no scars. It was overjoyed. It looked at the white-clothed man and said sincerely, "Thank you." The man in white looked at it and said casually, "Well, I think it's time to peel off its skin and make sleeves." The little fox instantly jumped back 3 feet and looked at him warily. Chapter 773. The little fox was afraid that he would catch it. No, the injury looks better, but there are still traces left. After all, it was damaged once. I never do business that loses money, so I can't waste the elixir to save you. The man in white looked down at it. Unless you can think of a way to repay me. The little fox looked at the bonfire next to it and then looked at him. Finally, it thought of a compromise. Benefactor must be hungry. I can catch a few musk rabbits for you. Their meat is very delicious when roasted. The man was easy to talk to. He nodded slightly and agreed to its condition. The little fox was overjoyed and immediately ran to catch the rabbits. It was good at catching rabbits and soon caught 2 of them. It dragged them in front of the man and let out a sigh of relief. Okay, I'm here to catch rabbits. I'm a man of my word. Can we go now? The man looked at it. When did I say that you can leave after catching the rabbits? The little fox was stunned. It tilted its head to think and found that the man really didn't say anything. It could only accept its fate and looked at him cautiously. Then what do you want to let me go? Roast them and let me see your skills. But I don't know how to. The little fox was a little embarrassed. You've gained intelligence. Are you going to eat raw meat and drink blood? The man glanced at the 2 rabbits and then looked at it. Don't tell me you want to become like them? The little fox shivered and could only accept its fate and help him cook the rabbits. Its original fox form was inconvenient, so it thought for a while and finally changed into its human form. When Ning Xuema saw its human form, she couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. It was an unbelievably beautiful girl. She looked to be 7 or 8 years old and was wearing a layered white gauze dress. Her black hair reached her forehead and her black hair fell to her shoulders. She had a pair of big watery eyes. She looked like an angel who had fallen into the mortal world. What made Ning Xuema stunned was not how beautiful she was, but that this girl's appearance was 80 to 90% similar to her appearance when she was a child. When she was a child in the modern world, her parents took her to take many artistic photos with makeup. When she was 8 or 9 years old, she wore a snow-white princess dress and took a set of artistic photos. Her appearance in the photos was almost identical to the girl in front of her. Ning Xuemo realized that she was in a dream, but why did the little 8-tailed fox in her dream look so much like her? Could it be that because this was her dream he automatically assumed the role? She was a little puzzled, but she couldn't find an answer at the moment. The girl wasn't lying. She really didn't know how to cook rabbits. Her method of skinning rabbits was very clumsy. After a long time, she still hadn't managed to skin a single rabbit. The man coldly watched from the side. Finally, he seemed to have lost his patience. He raised his hand and lifted the rabbit from her hand. With a twist of his finger, the rabbit was completely skinned. The little girl shuddered and cautiously took 2 steps back, afraid that she would be skinned like the rabbit. The man did not touch the rabbit with his own hands, nor did he use a knife. He only used the white light from his fingertips to envelop the rabbit and spin it around twice. Then the rabbit was cleaned up. It was enough to make the little girl envious. A moment later, the 2 rabbits were skewered on the tree branches and roasted over the fire. Soon the rabbit meat turned golden. It looked delicious and the skin was covered in oil. Chapter 774. The little girl watched from the side and swallowed her saliva. She watched as the man took down a roasted rabbit from the branch. She couldn't help but go over and squat by his feet. She pulled one of his sleeves and asked, "Can I hunt 2 more rabbits in exchange for a rabbit leg? 1 leg is enough." Her eyes shone brightly under the bonfire. The man looked down at the little hand that was holding his sleeve and waved it away without batting an eyelid. The little girl's eyes dimmed and she took 2 steps back. "Can I go now?" The man glanced at her and said lightly, "Wait a little longer." The little girl knew that she was no match for him, so she didn't play any tricks. She watched as the man finished eating the 2 rabbits, leaving only a rabbit leg. The man stopped eating. He held the rabbit leg in his hand and glanced at the little girl. The little girl was probably starving. She swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared at the rabbit leg. However, she couldn't bring herself to ask for it again. The man tossed the rabbit leg in his palm. "Do you want to eat it?" The little girl paused for a moment. She was probably stubborn. She pursed her lips and said, "No." Her stomach growled. The man's eyes flashed. He suddenly patted his sleeve and a furry mink came out. The mink had 3 tails and it stared at the rabbit leg as soon as it came out. The man threw the rabbit leg in the air between the little mink and the little girl. The little girl was stunned. The rabbit leg was very close to her. She could almost reach it with her hand, but her pride didn't allow her to do so. The little mink didn't care about this. It jumped in the air and bit the rabbit leg. It held it with its 2 front paws and ate it happily. The little girl was speechless. Her little face was red and her big eyes were misty. At this moment, Ning Xuema unexpectedly read her grievances. She was obviously hungry. She was the one who hunted the rabbit, but now the mink took advantage of it. The little girl suddenly turned around and ran away. She didn't want to talk to this man anymore. She would never listen to him play the zither or the flute again. She suddenly tripped and rolled on the ground. A white light flashed and she was forced to turn back into a little fox. The man flicked his sleeve and its body flew back, landing not far from the mink. The mink proudly looked at it before lowering its head to continue gnawing on the rabbit leg. The little fox could only watch helplessly. The man didn't even look at it as he said indifferently, "Remember, there are some things that you have to fight for with your life. If you don't fight for it, what originally belonged to you will be snatched away by others." The little fox was originally looking at him angrily, but when she heard his words, she was stunned. Her eyes seemed to flash with light. The man leisurely stood up, his sleeves fluttering as he left in a carefree manner. He didn't even want that mink anymore. The mink was also stunned for a moment before it suddenly ran towards the man while squeaking, as if it was unwilling to be abandoned like this. It finally caught up to the man with great difficulty and desperately jumped towards him. But just as it jumped, it seemed to be blocked by something. Before it could even touch the man's clothes, it fell down. The mink was unwilling to give up. It pounced again and again, but it was blocked again and again. Finally, it gave up and stood there crying out in grief. Chapter 775. The little fox stood there for a while looking at his back and suddenly shouted, "I will fight for what I deserve. I will not give it to anyone else." The man did not even turn back. The little fox shouted again, "My name is Momo." Mo as in stranger. Ning Xuema's heart suddenly trembled. Momo. Even the name was the same as hers. Her childhood nickname was Momo as well. While she was in a daze, the scene in front of her had changed, and this change was like a fast shot. She saw the little fox come to the place where the man was playing the zither and flute several times, as if it wanted to wait for the man to come again, but every time it went, the man did not come again. Maybe he was just passing by and saw the beautiful scenery, so he stayed for a few days. After a few days, he really left. The little fox finally stopped running to the mountain. It returned to its human form and practiced the zither with all its might every day, cultivating martial arts with all its might. Through the fast-forwarded scenes, Ning Xuema saw that she had fought with many people and learned her lesson from her repeated defeats. She also learned how to fight, how to use all kinds of methods to fight for everything. She knew how to act cute, she knew how to fake cry when she should make a move, she did it without hesitation. She learned all kinds of robbing methods. Finally, the camera stopped at one of her zither practice when a girl in red came to her door. When Ning Xuema saw the red-clothed girl's appearance, she was shocked. The girl in red looked exactly the same as the white-clothed Momo. The only difference was that one was in red and the other was in white. The red-clothed girl's eyes were even more ferocious than Momo's, and there was a faint black mist around her. The girl in red shouted at the white-clothed Momo, "Shui Yimo. You still haven't given up. You are not as good as me. You don't have the right. You want to win against me? Take the position of the devil ancestor's daughter?" The white-clothed Shui Yimo looked at her with a tilted head, fingers playing the zither, and smiled, "We are twins, what right do we have? The daughters of the devil ancestor have always been twins. We will use our own methods to win the position of the devil ancestor's daughter, and use our own methods to win the black wave zither." At this time she was already 12 or 13 years old. Her smile was so beautiful that it could topple cities. She looked sweet and cute. The fiend ancestor's princess can only be inherited by red-dressed people. Yet you are dressed in white. There is no need for a competition. You are not qualified. The red-dressed girl was furious. Shui Yimo slowly stood up. As she did so, her white robes turned red, dazzling and eye-catching. The girl in red was shocked and stared at her. How could this be? Suddenly he seemed to realize something. You used the skin-changing technique. You actually used the skin-changing technique. Shui Yimo's fingers fiddled with the zither strings. So what? There was no lack of white-robed successors in the past demon grandmasters as long as they were willing to endure the pain and use the skin-changing technique. Shui Tong, I originally didn't want to compete with you for the position of the first wife's princess. It was you who plotted against me first. The name of the red-clothed girl who came later was Shui Tua. Her charming face alternated between green and white. After a while, she gnashed her teeth and said, I only hate that I didn't kill you back then. I shouldn't have shown you mercy. Shui Yimo's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. Showing mercy to your enemy is being cruel to yourself. Shui Tong, you taught me this principle. Also, you don't need to sell me this favor. You didn't show mercy to me back then. You just didn't expect me to be able to escape with my life. You didn't expect me to be able to survive with my injuries to that extent. Chapter 776. If she hadn't met that man, she would have really died from her injuries. Snowy Tong paused and snorted, Then let's wait and see. We'll meet at the zither competition the day after tomorrow. She stomped her feet and ran away. Snow Emo sat there with her eyes downcast. Her fingers once again touched the zither strings. A drop of blood dripped from her fingertips and fell on the zither surface, melting like a flower. The skin-changing technique peeled the skin and broke the bones. The pain was unbearable. But she had no other choice if she wanted to live here. I will win, she said to herself word by word. She opened her hands and looked at the hard calluses on her tender fingertips from playing the zither. Momo, you must win. Ning Shuima looked at the girl sitting there alone. In that instant she seemed to sense her mood. She couldn't help but take a step forward. The scene in front of her changed again. A hall without any doors or windows. There was a faint blue light in the hall, illuminating people's faces like ghostly flames. A red-clothed girl fell on the ground. She was covered with bruises and her body twitched slightly on the ground. She was holding a zither in her arms. All the strings had been broken. There were bloodstains on it. The other red-clothed girl also had a lot of scars on her body. But she was sitting. There was only one string left on the zither in front of her. And it was this last string that allowed her to win. The two girls were wearing the same clothes and had the same appearance. But Ning Shuema still recognized at a glance that the one lying on the ground was Snow Yi Tong and the one sitting was Snow Emo. Snow Emo looked down at Snow Yi Tong. Her pair of eyes that were originally clear like water turned black like a whirlpool. Snow Yi Tong, you lost. Snow Yi Tong raised her head. Her face was pale and full of unwillingness. Why? Why was she the winner? Obviously I should be the winner. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. A fluttering voice suddenly sounded in the hall. This voice was male and female at the same time. It was unknown where it came from. Ning Shuima took advantage of the fact that no one could see her. She quickly turned around in the hall, but she still couldn't find the person who was speaking. Snow Emo knelt down. Lord Devil Ancestor. The snow-robed talisman began to tremble as he hissed, Lord Devil Ancestor, give Asi another chance. Next time, Ayao will definitely win against her. Before she could finish her sentence, a gust of wind blew in the hall. In the center of the gust of wind was a huge whirlpool, which sucked in the snow-clothed Tong who was covered in cuts and bruises. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared without a trace. From the whirlpool came the snow-robed talisman's blood-curdling screams, which made people feel cold all over. Snowy Emo lay on the ground, doing her utmost to control her body from trembling. Emo, you still went easy on her. The voice sounded again. You should kill her. It would be best if you cut off her head. Shui Emo pursed her lips, still kneeling on the ground. Finally she asked, why? She and I are twin sisters, so why must one of us die? This was what she couldn't understand the most. Why? The voice repeated softly and laughed. Silly child, because there can only be one fiend ancestor. The fiend ancestor's children have always been twins. The strong will inherit the fiend ancestor's position, and the weak will only have one word, death. That's why Asi tried so hard to scheme against you. That's why she tried to kill you again and again. I thought she would win because she was more ruthless than you. I didn't expect you to win, and you even let her live. Snowy Emo, Snowy Tong, haha, when combined they were strangers. They were destined to be strangers. Chapter 777. It's really beyond my expectations. However, your zither skills are indeed much better than Ayao's. I'm very pleased. What about her? Shui Emo couldn't help but ask. A loser. Why do you care where she went? The voice became cold. Yes. Shui Emo replied. Emo, remember, as a devil the most taboo is affection. Whether it's family, friendship, or love, you must abandon them all. Emo will remember. Hehe, you still lack tempering, my successor. Shui Emo's fingers clenched tightly in her sleeves. Lord Devil Ancestor, Emo still doesn't understand. Since Ayao and I will become enemies sooner or later, why did you make us love each other so much when we were children? Lord Devil Ancestor also said that Ayao and Emo must advance and retreat together, live and die together. Her lips were about to turn white. Since they were destined to be life and death enemies, why did you make them so close when they were children, so close that they were like one person? Hee. The Devil Ancestor laughed coldly, carrying a bone-piercing chill. What do you think? Shui Emo shivered and didn't dare to speak again. After all, she was still young and couldn't figure out the crux of the matter. Ning Shuima was, after all, experienced in the world. She faintly felt a chill in her heart. She understood the Devil Ancestor's intentions. To become the devil ancestor, one must be ruthless and emotionless. The more Shui Yimo and Shui Yimo loved each other when they were young, the greater the psychological impact when they became enemies when they grew up would be, and the easier it would be to temper their demonic nature. Remember, no one in this world can be trusted. No one can make you pity them. This Lord will pass on half of my demonic power to you. Practice this black wave zither well. This Lord will wait for the day when you can go into battle alone to kill enemies. The black wave zither needs you to feed it with human blood. An orchid zither appeared at Shui Yimo's feet. It faintly emitted a light luster, beautiful and evil. Shui Yimo slowly reached out and hugged the zither, replying with a single word, yes. The scene quickly changed again. Ning Shuima saw Shui Yimo practicing the zither every day. The blood on his fingers blistered and broke, dripping with blood from time to time. She finally sat in a blood-red carriage, but she was sitting in the middle of the carriage and there was another person sitting in the middle of the carriage. The blood-red chariot was protected in the middle by a dense mass of demon soldiers. They were fighting with what seemed to be people from the immortal world. Blood flowed like a river and white bones were scattered. The person in the carriage was also playing the zither, but the sound was very ordinary. The one who had truly released the killing sound and used the sound waves to kill was Snowy Immortal, who was sitting in the mezzanine. The people in the carriage would change from time to time, but Shui Yimo, who was in the compartment, couldn't be changed. She was the only one. Every note was a killing weapon, and every note would slit the opponent's throat. The black wave zither was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, reaping countless lives on the battlefield. As for Shui Yimo, she had gone from vomiting when she first went to the battlefield, to being numb, and then to talking and laughing while killing. The frequent killings turned the once naive girl into a beautiful little devil. Her zither skills became better and better, and the number of people she killed also increased. Not only did she have to deal with people from the immortal world on the battlefield, she also had to deal with wave after wave of assassinations in the demon world. Those who came to assassinate her included her former good friends, her former loyal subordinates, and even her maids. Chapter 778. Shui Yimo still loved to smile. Her smile was as sweet as honey, but her actions were as vicious as a demon's. Countless people had died under her zither, and she didn't care about them anymore. However, every time she killed someone she would wash her hands over and over again. Her fingers would slowly become as tender as spring onions. After washing her hands, she would stretch out her fingers and look at them in front of her eyes. "I don't want to kill people," she murmured, her expression somewhat disgusted. Then she laughed again, "But I want to live." Her beautiful eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. "So, it's better for me to kill people?" As she killed more and more people, her red clothes became redder and redder. She began to like bright colors and luxurious decorations. All the furnishings in her boudoir were extremely luxurious, shining everywhere. She was so dazzling that it made people dizzy. However, in her boudoir, there was often a vase of plain wildflowers. Those flowers were unremarkable. The flowers were small and light in color, like something that grew randomly on the roadside. She often sat alone in front of the flowers, hugging her knees, looking at the flowers for half an hour. Occasionally he would laugh and say, "Can you still recognize me when you see me now?" Ning Shuima didn't pay attention to the wildflowers at first, but after hearing her words, her heart was moved. She finally remembered that the wildflowers were from that mountain, and that they had once swayed under the feet of that man in white who played the zither. Ning Shuima clenched her fingers. She strangely understood this girl's mentality. At that time, that man had taught her to fight for her own things. Now, not only had she learned to fight for it, she had also learned to plunder. In her dark life, that brief moment of contact with that man in white had become the only pure land in her heart. Time passed by one battle after another. The red clothes of that girl in white had become more and more vivid under the tempering of blood and fire. The fiery red clothes were as dazzling as the setting sun. She would occasionally go to that mountain, but she had never met that man again. But one time she accidentally saved a white-clothed youth who had been betrayed by his family and was being chased by his entire clan. Actually, she was too lazy to meddle in other people's business, but the young man's white clothes attracted her. His picturesque face attracted her, making her violate the devil's principles and save him. Ning Shuima felt like she was watching a thrilling blockbuster movie. In the blockbuster movie there was a rain of blood. Gratitude and resentment made her heart rise and fall. The scenes changed very quickly, like fragments of memories, flashing by rapidly and disappearing into the distance. Ning Shuima was originally engrossed in watching, but when she saw the face of the boy who had been saved, she shuddered violently. Shuilan. She blurted out. As he shouted, he suddenly felt his body tighten. The scenery in front of him suddenly melted away like snow in spring, her body shuddered, and she finally opened her eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, the dream seemed to have been wrapped in a dense fog, and it quickly faded away. His body was warm and his lower body was soft. Reflected in his eyes was a white robe with flowing dark lines. A faint familiar fragrance seeped into her nose, making her absent-minded for a moment. But after a moment of absent-mindedness, she suddenly looked up as if she had been struck by lightning. Black satin hair flowed in front of her eyes. Looking along the black hair, she saw the soul-stirring beautiful face of the venerable ancestor. He supported his head with one hand as he reclined beside her. He just happened to be looking at her calmly. The light in his eyes was somewhat unpredictable. Chapter 779. She nestled herself in the ancestor's arms without any trace of politeness. One of her hands was holding onto his lapel, and the other leg was wrapped around his waist. This position was simply like the most intimate of lovers hugging each other to sleep. When did she and the Dizun sleep so well together? Ning Xuema's face turned red and she hurriedly stepped back. There was no obstruction on all sides of the bed, and she retreated too quickly so she almost fell from the other side. "Be careful," he said faintly. He stretched out his hand and pulled her back. "Are you okay?" Ning Xuema almost fell into his arms again after being pulled by his hand. She hurriedly used the weight of 1,000 pounds to stabilize her body in place. The Dizun looked at her without saying anything. He never answered other people's nonsense. Now that he was able to lie by her side and not in that ice shell, he naturally recovered. Although he hadn't completely recovered, he could move freely. His gaze was too deep, and Ning Xuema's scalp went numb from his gaze. She coughed and wanted to turn over and sit up. A hand was placed on her shoulder. "Lie down with this king for a while." Although he didn't use any strength, Ning Xuema couldn't break free if she didn't struggle vigorously. At this time, struggling vigorously was too artificial. Therefore, Ning Xuema had no choice but to no longer get up, but she quietly moved away slightly. She really felt a little pressured to sleep in the same bed as the Dizun. Especially on a night like this, when she was covered with a blanket. The Dizun naturally noticed her small movements, but he didn't say anything. His eyes darkened slightly, but he didn't do anything else. He turned over and lay down, looking up at the vast sky above his head and sighed softly. Rongyue Tianlan had said that when a girl rejected you, you must remember to be impulsive so as to not scare the other party away. You must plan slowly. The Dizun had never lacked patience. He could wait. In any case, she was now in his bed beside him. Ning Xuema saw him like this and secretly sighed in relief. She didn't want to be too intimate with him right now because she didn't know her own feelings. She had already calmly examined his complexion just now. He was no longer so pale and his breathing was even. "You should be fine." She put down her worries and lay down. The stars were bright and reflected in her eyes. From where she was, she could see the stars twinkling in the sky. Ning Xuema's body was covered with a cloud quilt, and the quilt was as soft as a cloud. There were large and small clouds around her body. The four walls and floor were dark blue, and the stars were bright and dark. For a moment she had the illusion of lying in the clouds and looking at the stars. Ning Xuema couldn't help but touch the bedding beneath her. The bedding was extremely soft and warm, making it very comfortable to lie on. Was that frighteningly cold cloud bed under the blankets? She couldn't help. She put her hand under the quilt. She was cold. The cloud bed was still the same cloud bed, but with a layer of quilt on top. It became her paradise. Needless to say, this was the Dizun's doing. She had already turned this castle upside down. Not to mention a quilt, there wasn't even a piece of cloth. But now the quilt was complete. Obviously, the Dizun had made it after he woke up. She already knew that the Dizun had a storage space, but it couldn't be seen normally. Chapter 780. That storage space was very strange. Even if he was stripped naked, he wouldn't be able to find it. Whenever he wanted to take something, he had to come by himself. Ning Xuema knew that there should be a lot of things in the storage space. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to change things at any time. What she didn't expect was that the ancestor actually brought a quilt with him at all times. No wonder he could go wherever he wanted to go. It was really convenient to have this storage space. She was lying there with the high and mighty god beside her. Ning Xuema felt like she was dreaming. Before going to sleep, she was still guarding him in the ice shell. She was afraid and anxious. In this hall, she felt indescribably lonely and desolate. Now that the ancestor woke up and was lying beside her, even if the two of them didn't speak, her heart strangely calmed down. Between heaven and earth, it was quiet and peaceful. They could hear each other's breathing. They could reach out and hold each other's hands. The distance between them was neither too far nor too close, making her feel safe. Did you have a nightmare just now? After an unknown amount of time, the ancestor broke the silence and asked. Ning Xuema was stunned. She shook her head and said, "No, I didn't." "You just called out Shuilan." The ancestor's voice was neither fast nor slow. At this time he naturally wasn't jealous. He knew how much this girl hated Shuilan. If she called out in her dream, it could only mean that she was frightened by him. Ning Xuema thought for a moment. She couldn't remember her dreams. This time it was also a blank. She couldn't remember anything. She shook her head and said, "I forgot. I can't remember anything in my dreams." The ancestor's eyes slightly deepened. "You can't remember even one of your dreams?" "Yes, I can't remember anything. I forget it when I wake up." Ning Xuema answered casually. She had been like this since she was a child. She was already used to it. The ancestor didn't speak again. His hand was on her wrist. It was normal for people to not remember most of their dreams. However, they would occasionally remember a few. It was rare to see someone like Ning Xuema who couldn't remember a single one. Could it be that there was something wrong with her soul? The moment he placed his hand on her wrist, he suddenly remembered that he had lost a great deal of his power, so he didn't have the power to examine her soul. Her wrist was delicate and smooth. The ancestor originally wanted to withdraw his hand, but at this time he didn't want to. He just held her hand and didn't say anything. At first, Ning Xuema thought that he was checking her pulse and had physical contact with him. Although she still felt a little strange in her heart, she still obediently let him hold her. Later she saw that after he finished checking her pulse he did not leave. Instead, he held her hand without moving or speaking. His palm was dry and warm. It was obviously the temperature of a normal person, but Ning Xuema felt a little hot for no reason, making her body heat up for no reason. She wanted to withdraw her hand, but the ancestor held her hand tightly. He wouldn't let go, so she couldn't withdraw her hand. Forget it, it was just a handshake. She didn't need to care about it. Although she thought so, she was still a little nervous and the two of them were a little quiet. Ning Xuema slightly closed her eyes and raised her head to look at the starry sky. Such a good night always made people's hearts soften. "Ancestor." She opened her mouth to break the silence. "Are you still calling me ancestor?" The ancestor asked her. His eyes were slightly shining. Under the starlight, his picturesque eyebrows were as handsome as a celestial being. Ning Xuema paused. She knew that she couldn't escape. "What? Great God Han." Since the other party was determined to expose her identity, it was useless for her to escape. Chapter 781. When did you recognize me? Well, not too long ago. In fact, Ning Xuema and he had not known each other for long. This girl was still so slippery. "Since you recognized me, why didn't you say so?" The Dizun pressed. Was there a need to say it? She was just a small shrimp in Jianghu who blindly exposed the great god's disguise. She was afraid that the great god would kill her. Xuema knew that the Dizun treated her well and seemed to treat her differently. However, he hid his identity, which meant that it was not time for her to recklessly expose him. Moreover, she was only his concubine in name. She did not want to be nosy. Whatever he wanted to play, she would accompany him to deal with various identities. Of course, this could not be said truthfully, so Ning Xuema just smiled and did not speak. The Dizun seemed to understand and sighed softly. "Xuema, have you always been so guarded against people?" Ning Xuema lowered her eyes. In fact, she also knew that her guard was very heavy and it was very difficult for her to trust people. She thought that this was an instinct trained as a secret agent, but now that she thought about it, it also seemed to be a problem. She did not want to continue this topic. "The Dizun you, Jioli," the Dizun said faintly. Ning Xuema did not understand. "Shinjuli my name." The Dizun said word by word, still holding her hand. "You can call my name when there is no one around." Ning Xuema's heart suddenly jumped. She had long guessed that the Dizun should have a real name. However, it seemed that no one on this continent knew. She did not expect that he would say it at this time. Her heart warmed. Shinjuli, this name was really noble and suited his identity. However, in this world was there anyone with the surname Shin? The Dizun now told her his real name. Did he mean to open his heart to her? Her heart suddenly beat wildly. Jiuli had been holding Ning Xuema's hand, and his thumb was also on her pulse. Naturally, he could feel her heart beating wildly. In the blue night, his eyes were shining like stars, and there seemed to be a flash of a smile. "Are you nervous?" His body leaned towards Xuema, his eyes shining as he looked at her. Dizun was very close to her, so close that Ning Xuema could hear his steady heartbeat. Ning Xuema was somewhat flustered. Tonight, Dizun seemed to be taking advantage of his victory to pursue something, not giving her a chance to escape or take a breather. She coughed. "Dizun, Jiuli." Jiuli corrected her. "Jiuli." Ning Xuema finally called out his name. She didn't know why, but when the name came out of her mouth, there was a faint pain in the depths of her heart, as if there was a thin string pulling there, making her eyes inexplicably warm. She cursed in her heart. Tonight was very evil. She seemed to be very emotional, not like her usual self at all. She calmed herself down and looked around. This place is so beautiful. However, it was not like the great god's taste at all. Ning Xuema did not dare to say the last sentence out loud. She was actually very curious. "Dizun." She called out, but when she saw that his face was not good, she quickly changed her words. "I will call you great god. I'm more used to calling you that." She did not know why, but she was not willing to call him by his real name. Jiuli did not care. He just wanted to tell her his real name. As for whether she would call him by his real name, it was her business. "What do you want to say?" Jiuli twirled a strand of her hair and played with it. Obviously, he acquiesced to her name. Chapter 782. Ning Xuema finally heaved a sigh of relief. "This is the place where you practice, right? You must come here often, right? It's very pleasing to the eye and very beautiful. Also, the spiritual energy here is very abundant." "I don't come here often." Jiuli's voice was faint. "It's boring to be here alone." He was also afraid of boredom? Ning Xuema was very surprised. "I heard that the most suitable places for meditation and cultivation are very quiet and remote places. Almighty, don't you choose such places for meditation?" Logically speaking, this place was very suitable for cultivation. Jiuli said, "I practice in other places. How could the Almighty not choose such a beautiful place?" "Then your practice place must be very beautiful too, right? With the Almighty's personality, his practice place must be more poetic and picturesque." "It's average." Jiuli's words were always concise. He was not lying. His practice place was an ice cave. There was nothing in the ice cave except for an ice bed. "I don't believe you." Maybe the night was too beautiful, or maybe they had opened their hearts a little, and he was no longer so high and mighty. Ning Xuema talked to him casually. "You need to be calm when you practice. Avoid being confused by the things around you, so the simpler the practice place, the better." Jiuli explained to her. But he was a little absent-minded. With his cultivation, he could meditate quickly even in a busy city and would not be disturbed by external things. If he wanted to practice, he could do it anywhere. But this place was not suitable. This place was very quiet and full of spiritual energy. He did not even have to worry about being disturbed in this place. But he could not. Every time he came here, he was inexplicably impetuous and could not calm down. So he gave up on this place and would not come here again for many years. This time, if he did not accidentally fall into the dark forest and was seriously injured and in need of treatment, he would not come here. Ning Xuema actually understood his reasoning, but she was a little regretful. "Even so, this place is so well built. It's a pity that you did not come here to practice. This place was not built by me. It had always existed. It has existed for at least 3,000 years. Jiuli explained, "I discovered this place by accident." Ning Xuema was surprised. She didn't expect that this place was actually left behind by an ancestor more than 3,000 years ago. She originally wanted to ask about the two sabers, but now it seemed that there was no need to ask. The ancestor probably didn't know either. Those jellyfish paths outside were created by Dizun, right? It seemed that he was the only one who could walk, so it must have something to do with him. Jiuli shook his head again. "Everything here is from 3,000 years ago, including the jellyfish road. But why did they only allow you to leave?" Ning Xuema blurted out. "Good question. I'd like to know that too." Jiuli chuckled. He did not smile easily, but when he smiled, it was like a flower blooming in the night. Ning Xuema was dazzled by his smile. She quickly looked away and looked at the galaxy in the sky, then looked at the surrounding scenery. She sighed. The person who could create such a place must be a wonderful person. This place is so romantic. It's just like a castle in a myth. Do you like it? I like it. Ning Xuema answered without hesitation. Since you like it, let's stay here for a few more days. Xin Jiuli was infected by Xuema's smile, and his mood became better. While they were talking, their bodies were getting closer and closer, but she did not notice. Chapter 783. Ning Xuema seemed to be used to his touch and didn't notice it at all. When she heard that she could stay for a few more days, she immediately smiled and said, "Of course." She really liked this place and wanted to stay for a few more days, but she finally thought of a very important problem. But there's nothing to eat here. She hadn't eaten anything for a whole night, so she was hungry. As if it was a coincidence, her stomach immediately grumbled a few times. Although the sound wasn't very loud, Shinjioli, who was close by, also heard it. He seemed to have finally thought of this fatal problem. He could abstain from food, but Ning Xuema couldn't. He suddenly felt a little scared. Fortunately, he had only fainted for a day. If it had been a little longer, this girl might have starved to death here. Even the weakest of his disciples was at least Earth rank level 3 and had reached the level of abstaining from food for more than a month. The people around him were also like this, so his thinking was habitual and he didn't consider that this little girl was actually as fragile as glass. If he didn't consider it carefully, he could have caused fatal damage to her. Just like the hairpin that he spent an entire night carving, if he accidentally pinched it, it would be crushed. Since he considered that she was hungry, Ning Xuema's stomach finally reacted and growled one after another. It was especially loud in the quiet night. Ning Xuema blushed. It was too embarrassing. She was screaming like this. Shinjiuli looked at her red face and couldn't help but laugh. He raised his hand and rubbed her hair. If you're hungry, then you're hungry. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Wait. He turned over and got off the bed. She didn't know where he took out a fishing rod and walked out. Ning Xuema's heart couldn't help but jump when he rubbed her hair. She was also dazzled by his smile. When she reacted, Shinjiuli had already walked out. She was a little curious. She had already seen the water. Other than those jellyfish, she didn't see any other creatures. What could he catch with a fishing rod? She simply turned over and got off the bed and followed him out. The night was cold as water. After all, it was early winter and this place was unusually cold. Ning Xuema didn't feel it when she was in bed, but once she walked out, she still felt a little uncomfortable and shivered. Where it? Shinjiuli was sitting cross-legged on a futon fishing. One end of the long fishing rod was in the water, and the other end was in his hand. As if sensing her approach, he casually tossed her a cloak. The cloak looked very thin, but it was very warm when wrapped around the body. Ning Xuema put it on without hesitation, walked to his side and looked into the water. After all, it was night time and they couldn't see anything clearly. What's in the water? She was curious. Good stuff, he replied. Shinjiuli motioned for her to sit next to him and warned her, "Be good and don't make any noise. That thing is afraid of noise." Ning Xuema looked at the praying mat that appeared beside him out of thin air. The Almighty's praying mat could really appear wherever he went. She inexplicably thought of Yi Qingwan's collection. It seemed that there were 2 praying mats. The Almighty had too many praying mats. It seemed that he had a habit of throwing them everywhere. No wonder someone picked them up as a souvenir. A thought suddenly came to her mind. She remembered hearing Yi Qingwan say that she used to cultivate in the dark forest. Dizun also came to the dark forest to see her. Did Dizun also bring Yi Qingwan here? She wanted to ask the Almighty, but he said not to make any noise. Ning Xuema used her foot to push the praying mat. It was too close to him. If she sat on it, she would directly lean on him. Chapter 784. She wanted to move the futon away a little, but it seemed to be rooted there. She couldn't move it. Shinjiuli finally looked at her with a faint smile. Are you afraid that something on me will bite you? He transmitted his voice so he wouldn't disturb the things in the water. Ning Xuema paused for a moment. Forget it. She was not a shy person. Occasionally, when the mission required, she would put her arm around a man's shoulder. She sat down next to Shinjiuli, and the two of them leaned against each other. Her warm and soft body leaned on his arm, with the unique fragrance of a young girl. She sat next to him by the lakeside. A gentle breeze blew and Xuema's hair lightly brushed against his face and neck. It was cool and slightly ticklish, making him have the urge to hug her in an instant. But thinking of Rongyue Tianlan's plan of taking things slowly, he stopped again. He couldn't scare her away and break the peace that he had obtained with great difficulty. He was a straightforward person. He would do whatever he wanted to do, but now he had scruples. The person he loved was by his side, but he couldn't hug her. Ning Xuema's eyes were fixed on the fishing rod. She suddenly thought of a very important question. Great God, there isn't even a blade of grass or a stove here. How are you going to cook the fish you caught? She also learned to transmit her voice. Although she was not very experienced, the two of them were so close that Shinjuli could still hear it clearly. He glanced at her sideways and his eyes flashed slightly. He sighed softly. Recently I have lost a lot of power. It is very tiring to transmit my voice. This sentence was said directly in her ear and his voice was slightly weak. Ning Xuema immediately remembered that he was in a state of near death in the first half of the night. She immediately believed his words. Looking at his side face, she was a little worried. Then you don't have to transmit your voice. Are you okay? Shinjuli leaned his body on her. I'm a little cold. Come closer to me, it is easier to talk and we can snuggle to get warmth. Ning Xuema, the Almighty was actually quite cute when he was weak. Seeing that his face was indeed pale, she was afraid that he would faint again and turn into an ice sculpture. If that happened, her stomach would be empty again. He leaned against Ning Xuema. Xuema looked at his pale, almost transparent face, then at his long eyelashes that fluttered like a small fan. Looking at his gorgeous face, Ning Xuema finally forgot about his high and mighty status as a venerable emperor. She seemed to have just discovered that he was also an extremely young romantic youth. He was so fragile that it could melt anyone's heart into a bag of water. Besides, her food depended on his fishing rod, so Ning Xuema was really concerned about him. She took off her cloak and wanted to put it on him. Shinjuli was still very considerate of her. He stopped her. It's cold here. If you take it off you will catch a cold. This cloak is not small. Let's wear it together. Ning Xuema thought about it and agreed. She was now seizing every second to cultivate so she really could not catch a cold. Anyway, now that their bodies were leaning against each other, it was not a big deal to wear a cloak together. So she pulled the cloak and the two of them were wrapped together. In this way the two of them were stuck together like Siamese fish. There was no gap between the two of them. The blue night, the tranquil lake, the dreamlike castle, and the two of them snuggling together. Shinjuli suddenly felt unprecedentedly satisfied. It was as if he had finally found the other half of himself that he had lost for many years. His heart was warm and moved. An arm reached out and gently wrapped around her waist. Chapter 785. When he first came here he only felt lonely. Now that he had her by his side, he suddenly felt that this place was so beautiful and picturesque. Because he was greedy for this warmth, he almost didn't want to let the fish take the bait. However, considering her empty stomach, he felt that he couldn't be so cruel. Just as he was feeling conflicted, the first stupid fish took the bait. Ning Xuema finally saw the most exotic fish in the world. A transparent fish. This fish looked like salmon, but its body was completely transparent. Even its internal organs were transparent. If she didn't hold it in her hand, she would never believe that there was such a transparent fish in this world. The fish's body seemed to be carved out of crystal, and it struggled unwillingly between Ning Xuema's fingers. This fish looked so artistic that Ning Xuema almost couldn't bear to eat it. Shinjuli put away the fishing rod, and with a flick of his sleeve, a small stove appeared on the ground. There was also a small pot on the stove, and the water in the pot was bubbling and steaming. Ning Xuema was dumbstruck. How many things does the ancestor have on him? Great God, is there anything you didn't bring with you? Ning Xuema squatted beside him and watched him quickly clean up the fish. She was full of admiration and envy. She looked at the pot again. Won't the soup spill out in your space? No, the storage space has the function of preserving freshness and shape. The things you put in will be the same when you take them out. It's more reliable than outside, Shinjuli answered without raising his head. The way he handled the fish was also something Ning Xuema had never seen before. A white light shot out from his fingertip and the fish spun in the air. When the white light stopped, the fish had already been scaled and its internal organs were removed. It was ready to be put into the pot. He put the whole fish into the pot and his voice was still indifferent. This water divine fish is the most nutritious when cooked. It's suitable for people who cultivate the wood attribute. Wasn't that just right for her? Ning Xuema's eyebrows curved and she couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect that you, as the ancestor, would do such trivial things. She thought that he was a person who didn't do household chores. Shinjuli's fingers paused slightly and he didn't say anything. This skill seemed to have been with him for as long as he could remember. The long years were too boring, and he cultivated countless interests to pass the time. For example, playing chess, playing the zither, playing the flute, raising pets, making all kinds of strange things. No matter what he did, he was the best. When there was no room for improvement, his interest would change. He had countless interests, but the only one he had never studied was culinary skills. After all, a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen. He had already abstained from eating, so there was no need for him to do such things. It was just that when he was in the mood to cook some food, it wasn't because he was hungry but purely because he was bored. But even so, his culinary skills were still top-notch. No matter what food he made, he could accurately control the heat and taste. Great God, is there anything you don't have in your storage space? Ning Xuema was still very curious. She was bored anyway, so she wanted to gossip. There's nothing for you. Shinjuli's answer was very simple and irritating. Ning Xuema was speechless. Well, for the sake of the fish, she didn't care. How did you cultivate this storage space? Can you teach me? Ning Xuema was very envious of his storage space. Sure. Take me as your master. Shinjuli was still very happy. Chapter 786. Ning Xuema. She could not understand the great god's train of thought. At the same time, she thought of a very confusing question. Speaking of which, if Han Shangyue regained his status as an overlord, then did her status as a concubine still count? Seeing his intimate actions towards her after waking up, it should count. But now, he wanted her to be his disciple. He must be joking when he said that he was going to be his disciple. Who would want their concubine to be his disciple? She also said jokingly, if I really become your disciple, will you accept me? Shinjuli glanced at her and asked, why not? I heard that the great god's standards for accepting disciples are very strict. Those who are not Earth Stage Level 3 and above will not be accepted. I am Mortal Stage Level 7, I am still far from that. Ah, right, I also heard that you are going to publicly accept disciples this time. Ning Xuema thought of the group of young newcomers she saw when she passed by. Oh. Shinjuli gave her a one-word reply. This one word was too general. Ning Xuema was a little confused. Shinjuli raised his hand and rubbed her head. So you have to work hard. Work hard for what? Work hard to reach his standards for accepting disciples? But she was only Mortal Stage Level 7. Even if she did not eat or drink with her crazy genius speed, she would only be able to break through the highest point of the mortal stage and enter the Earth stage in 5 days. This was under the ideal situation where there were no accidents, and his condition was Earth stage 3rd rank. Even if she was a Qilin, she would not be able to catch up. The cultivation speed of normal geniuses was that when they were in the mortal stage, it was already very good to be able to rise 1 level in a year. Moreover, the higher the level, the harder it was to rise. After reaching mortal stage level 6, one might not even be able to rise 1 level in 3 to 4 years. And from the highest point of the mortal stage to the Earth stage, it would take 8 to 10 years. This was the cultivation speed of normal geniuses. For example, Ji Yunhao, unless it was a genius who broke through to the Earth stage at a very young age such as Ji Yunhuang. But such geniuses were rare, and these rare geniuses were mostly gathered in Buddha Lotus Mountain. It seemed that becoming his disciple was a fantasy, so Ning Xuema simply did not think about it. What are you thinking about? Shinjuli handed her a jade bowl. Inside the bowl was a milky white soup with white jade-like pieces of fish floating in it. Try it. How does it taste? The fragrance was intoxicating. This fragrance immediately made Ning Xuema forget what she was thinking. She immediately tasted it. The taste was extremely delicious, and it was especially suitable for her taste. Delicious. She gave him a thumbs up and praised him sincerely. She was starving and immediately began to enjoy the food. After she finished half a bowl, her hunger finally subsided. After soothing her stomach, she inadvertently raised her head and saw him sitting opposite her. He was looking at her lazily with his hand supporting his head. There seemed to be a slight smile on his lips. Ning Xuema felt a little uncomfortable being stared at. This great god was all about perfection. Did the way she wolfed down the food just now scare him? Why aren't you eating? Ning Xuema was a little embarrassed. Shinjuli paused and retracted his gaze. Actually, it didn't matter to him whether he ate or not. However, seeing that she was eating so happily, he would accompany her and eat a bowl. He took out another jade bowl and filled it to the brim. After tasting it, his eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Isn't it a little salty? He actually liked bland food, but every time he made something it was a little salty. Ning Xuema shook her head. No, it's just right for me. It was as if he made it according to her taste. Chapter 787. Ning Xuema had never eaten such delicious stewed fish. Shinjuli didn't say anything and sat there to eat. Ning Xuema stole a glance at his table manners. She couldn't help but praise in her heart that it was perfect. The Almighty could even eat so naturally, like a poem or a painting. The fish soup was delicious. Ning Xuema ate 2 bowls of soup with water and was finally satisfied. She looked at the jade bowl in her hand and sighed. The bowl that the Almighty casually took out was also a priceless treasure. It was carved out of a whole piece of fine jade. There were cloud-like patterns on it, simple and elegant. She suddenly remembered that there was also a jade bowl in Yi Qingwan's collection. But at that time, her mind was full of thoughts of escaping, so she didn't care about those things at all. She just glanced at it and vaguely felt that the bowl was similar to this one. Xuema couldn't help but ask, "Almighty, do you often bring your disciples here to cultivate? Did he once bring Yi Qingwan here to fish? Did he make fish soup for her?" Shen Jiuli glanced at her. "Usually when I accept them, I will kick them to the dark forest to cultivate for 3 days. It depends on their reaction speed and aptitude. It's so dangerous here, you must accompany them often, right?" "No." Shen Jiuli answered simply, "If they can't even solve the danger here, how can they be qualified to be my disciple?" It was indeed the Almighty's style. Ning Xuema's tone was both intentional and unintentional. "But I heard from Yi Qingwan that you have accompanied her here before. Is it because she is a girl so you take care of her?" Shen Jiuli pondered for a moment and said lightly, "It's not to accompany her but to pick her up 3 days later. Among all the disciples, she is the weakest and has the worst sense of direction. With her ability, she can't get out of the maze illusion ahead." He glanced at Ning Xuema again and there seemed to be a smile in his eyes. Was she jealous? "However, I can make an exception for you," Shen Jiuli added. Ning Xuema didn't understand. "What exception?" "If you come here to train in the future, I can accompany you here at any time." Ning Xuema, the Almighty still wanted to take her as his disciple? She didn't want to let the doubts in her heart churn back and forth, so she simply asked, "Great God, now that you've recovered your identity, then I, as a shield concubine, won't be used anymore, right? Can I leave now that I've succeeded?" Shen Jiuli looked at her unfathomably. "Do you hate this identity?" "Nonsense. Who would be willing to be a concubine?" Ning Xuema didn't say anything, but she expressed her meaning with her eyes. Shen Jiuli held her hand and led her inside. "Then work hard and become my disciple." Ning Xuema, the Almighty's disciple, fought so hard and he gave her this opportunity. Could it be that he saw that she was doing a good job as a shield concubine and wanted to give her a small benefit? He had been touching her for the past 2 days, and all his actions seemed to mean that he was using her as a pillow. It made her think that he was pursuing her, and she was a little conflicted, wondering how to reject him. Now that he suddenly had the intention to take her as his disciple, was she thinking too much? In his era, there should be a taboo for a master and disciple relationship, right? Ning Xuema vaguely heard that he hated a master and disciple relationship. Now that he suddenly wanted to take her as his disciple, was he afraid that she would pester him with the identity of a concubine in the future? So that he could completely destroy her imagination. Chapter 788. Ning Xuema couldn't figure it out. Unknowingly, she was led into the room and onto the bed. By the time she reacted, she had already been stuffed into the bed. He also loosened his outer robe, lifted the other side of the blanket and crawled in. He casually pulled her into his arms. "All right, time to sleep." Ning Xuema was speechless. She struggled out of his arms. "Guru, didn't you want to take me as your disciple? Why were they sharing a bed now?" "Well, you're not my disciple yet. So you're still my concubine." He pulled Xuema back and hugged her in his arms. He closed his eyes and yawned. "After so long, aren't you sleepy?" Ning Xuema was speechless. But she was a little mad and wanted to ask again. But as soon as she opened her mouth, he leaned down and kissed her lips gently. His breath was a little hot. "I'll give you 2 choices. 1, continue to be my concubine. 2, be my disciple. But to be my disciple, you need to cultivate hard. I don't want to be too selfish. Do you understand?" Was he forcing her to be his disciple? Ning Xuema suddenly had an epiphany. He suddenly made an exception to take in disciples this year, and there were no restrictions on gender. Was it actually to take her in? She held her breath. "If I can't be your disciple, will I have to be your concubine for the rest of my life?" He closed his eyes and didn't answer her directly. "So you have to become stronger." He was actually preparing to make Ning Xuema his wife. However, with her current aptitude, it was absolutely impossible. Once she was crowned as the empress, she wouldn't be able to survive the tribulation. She had to cultivate to the heavenly level in order to safely survive the tribulation with his help and not turn into ashes. As for taking in a disciple, it was imperative. First, others couldn't help her cultivate to the heavenly level. Even if there was someone who could help her cultivate, he didn't want his future wife to be trained by others. Why would he let others take advantage of something that he could do? Second, of course, it was to punish her a little. Didn't she make up a master-disciple relationship? Then he would fall in love with her once and make this a reality. His identity was special, and his words were like gold and jade, so there were some things that he could not say out loud. If he were to speak of it, it would be easily known by the will of the heavens, and it would then attract the divine lightning. Therefore he couldn't tell Ning Xuema his true thoughts. In any case, to him, whether it was his wife or concubine, she would always be by his side to accompany him. There was no difference. How could Ning Xuema know the twists and turns in his heart? To be honest, when she heard that he wanted to take her as his disciple, she was actually slightly relieved. After all, she didn't know what kind of feelings she had for him. If the ancestor were to force her to be his wife now, she would probably risk her life to refuse. Now there was finally another path, and this path was also a shortcut for her to quickly become stronger. The premise was that she was strong enough to reach Earth Stage Level 3 in 5 days. But could she create a miracle? Her heart was racing. Although she was tired, she couldn't fall asleep and couldn't help but toss and turn. Suddenly her waist tightened. He stretched out his arms and hugged her. His eyes were as deep as the stars in the dark night. Why are you moving around? Do you want this lord to be unable to control himself and consummate with you now? Ning Xuema's body stiffened, and her heart was secretly stunned. Lord Ancestor, why does it feel like the word consummate from your mouth is ruining your image? Chapter 789. In Ning Xuema's mind, a god like Di Zun should have no desires and shouldn't have the desires of a normal man. She was in his arms, her body half pressed against his, and she could clearly feel the subtle changes in his body. Ning Xuema knew that he wasn't just threatening her. She finally didn't dare to move and closed her eyes. Sleep, sleep, she was sleepy, she wanted to sleep. She was trying to hypnotize herself when she suddenly felt a warm sensation on her lips. She opened her eyes and met his slightly curved eyes. Her heart raced. A small compensation for not being able to consummate the marriage. He chuckled and closed his eyes. All right, go to sleep. The night was dark and she finally fell asleep. She slept peacefully in his arms. She didn't know when he opened his eyes, but he looked at her for a long time. He had been sleeping alone for thousands of years. Now that she was in his arms, he didn't feel uncomfortable. He even felt a little satisfied, as if she should have slept in his arms a long time ago. It was as if he had been used to hugging her for thousands of years, and now he was just finding this habit. He really couldn't consummate the marriage with her now. Cultivating a virgin body was the fastest. Once he lost his virginity, his cultivation speed would drop by half. After all, he wasn't an ordinary person. With her current body, she might not be able to bear his love. Once she bore his love, she wouldn't be able to cultivate and break through to the heaven realm. If he wanted her for a few decades, he naturally didn't have to worry about this. But what he wanted now was a long time, so he had to be very careful. So he could only hug her and hug her again. He couldn't do anything substantial. After looking at her for a while, he also closed his eyes and silently adjusted his breathing. No one knew that the wolf soulwood was his nemesis, but he was usually very strong. When he came down, as long as he was a little careful, these things wouldn't hurt him. But this time he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. In order to save her, he had no choice but to use himself as a cushion. He smashed into the wolf soulwood, and his body was pierced by them. One of them even hurt his heart meridian. This time, his injuries were unprecedentedly severe. He had to force himself to bring Ning Xuema to this place. Actually, the injury on his back could be healed by himself, but he was afraid that if he left Ning Xuema outside with her bad constitution, who knew what kind of disaster she would cause. Therefore, he used the last of his strength to bring her to this place and keep her by his side to protect her. What he didn't expect was that his attack would be so severe this time. Not only was he unconscious, but he also had a high fever. In the end, he even froze. However, his coma was different from others. After he fainted, his consciousness was drifting outside so he could see and sense everything. Ning Xuema carried him onto the bed, carried him off the bed, wiped his body and snuggled in his arms to keep him warm. He knew all these. It wasn't that she wasn't touched. He thought that Xuema didn't have any feelings for him. At most, they were just companions. He didn't expect that she would go to this extent for him. If it was another man in the same situation as him, she might help treat him, but she definitely wouldn't go into his arms, right? So he should be a little different in her heart? He seemed to be an indifferent person who didn't care about anything. But that was just something that didn't make him work hard for. In fact, he was very domineering in his bones. I'm actually quite domineering in my bones, so domineering that I want votes. Chapter 790. For thousands of years, the ancestor had never fancied a single person. Now that he fancied one, he naturally wouldn't let her run away. He had to chase her down in order to be satisfied. Besides, only a person like him was worthy of being Shuama's husband. As for the others, they didn't even need to think about it. He once again pulled her into his arms, his movements gentle. Perhaps she was too tired, but she didn't realize it. She even subconsciously nuzzled her head into his chest. This small act of trust caused the ancestor's eyes to deepen. He couldn't help but kiss Ning Shuama's forehead before falling asleep with satisfaction. Early the next morning, Ning Shuama woke up to find that the ancestor wasn't in bed. She breathed a sigh of relief but also a bit panicked. She was afraid that the ancestor had left her here in a fit of excitement. She jumped out of bed and looked around. Finally, she found him at the lakeside. He was stewing something in a small pot. The rich aroma caused Shuama to drool. So the ancestor had woken up early in the morning to stew something for her. Ning Shuama was moved. She immediately ran over and asked, "What are you stewing?" "Cloud pig fillet." Shinjoli was meditating on a nearby praying mat. He opened his eyes as he heard her movement. Ning Shuama didn't know what a cloud pig was, but it smelled so good that it was definitely delicious. Not only was there meat in the pot, but there were also other delicacies like mushrooms and mushrooms. "Hey, what are those blood-red slices?" Ning Shuama asked the question in her heart. "That's the blood jade lingji that you swindled from the 8th princess. It's perfect to eat with this meat," Shin Jioli explained to her. Ning Shuama subconsciously retorted, "What do you mean swindled? I exchanged for it. Hey, how come it's with you?" Ning Shuama remembered that all of her treasures were hidden in the clothes she wore on Carefree Island. At the time, in order to enter that mud shell, she had changed her clothes. Naturally, she had forgotten all of her treasures on Carefree Island. Could it be that the ancestor not only brought back her body but also all her treasures? Shin Jioli didn't answer her. Instead, he threw her a small bag. "Your pitiful belongings are in this bag. Take it." The small pouch was only the size of a palm, but Ning Shuama's heart skipped a beat. This seemed to be a Qingquan pouch that could hold anything. She picked it up and looked at it. The design was very simple. It was snow white in color, and there was a plum blossom drawn on the corner of the bag. It was sparse and slanted, looking very lifelike. Ning Shuama could almost smell the fragrance of the plum blossoms. Needless to say, this painting was the work of the Almighty. She opened the bag again, her heart almost bubbling with joy. Not a single one of her belongings was missing. They were all inside. Even her banknotes were all there. She was overjoyed and was about to flip through it again. A hand reached out from the side and closed the opening of her storage bag. Shin Jioli's voice faintly sounded out. "These things are all worldly possessions. Your current task is to focus all of your energy on cultivating. First, use the lotus leaf scattering technique and meditate for 2 hours." As he spoke, he put away her pouch. "Ning Shuama," she looked at the pot of meat. "Can I eat before I go?" "No. During these 2 hours, you must meditate and discard all distracting thoughts. If you don't reach the 8th level within these 2 hours, you are not allowed to eat." So strict? She hadn't even become his disciple and he was already strict with her. Level up within 2 hours? Did the Almighty think she had some sort of super cheat? However, since he put forth such a request, she would do her best to fulfill it. In any case, becoming stronger was her most pressing desire right now. Monthly votes, recommendation votes, she could vote every day. Chapter 791. Ning Shuama smiled and said, "Okay." She didn't say anything else and started to practice according to his instructions. According to his instructions, she sat by the lake facing the southeast direction and used the corresponding technique to regulate her breath. After a while, she felt abundant water spiritual energy gathering in her body. The speed of gathering spiritual energy was 3 times faster than usual. She was overjoyed. She concentrated even more. After an hour, Shuama's body suddenly flashed with a light green light and covered her whole body. After a while, the light green light dissipated and she jumped up. I did it. She actually did it. And it was ahead of time. She was so happy that her eyes were curved. She couldn't help but look in the direction where Shinjoli was sitting, but found that he wasn't there. Only the pot of meat was drying there and the temperature was just right. There was a note next to it: after eating the meat you can go to the cloud bed and practice for 4 hours. Use the wood lotus cultivation method. The content of the note was very simple, but it filled up her entire day. It could change every 4 hours or every 2 hours. The cultivation method used every 2 hours was different, and the posture of meditation was also different. Where was he? Did he leave again? Ning Xuema looked around and didn't see the shadow of the ancestor. Obviously he had left. Ning Xuema exhaled and ate the meat in the pot first. After eating, she felt that her body gradually became hot and the heat in her body was surging. It was so hot that she couldn't wait to take off all her clothes. She thought of the cloud bed and hurriedly ran in. The original quilt on the cloud bed was gone, and only a small futon was left in the middle of the bed. Obviously it was prepared for her. It seemed that he had thought of everything for her. Ning Xuema jumped on the bed and hurriedly sat on the futon. As soon as she sat on it, a line of words appeared in front of her: practice here. Take off all your clothes. No wonder he left. It turned out that practicing here required her to take off all her clothes. He wanted to avoid arousing suspicion. It seemed that he was a true gentleman. Even though Ning Xuema was sitting on the praying mat, she still felt hot and uncomfortable. Although she had some misgivings when she saw the words, she still took off her clothes without saying a word. Strangely enough, after taking off his clothes and sitting on the praying mat, he felt much more comfortable. She lowered her head and looked at herself. Was she performing on some kind of jade praying mat? Fortunately there was no one here. Otherwise, looking at her like this, she would probably be labeled as a slut. Time was of the essence, so she put away her wild thoughts and meditated according to the method left on the ancestor's note. The cloud bed was extremely cold. Although it was separated by a praying mat, it was still uncomfortable to sit on it for a while. Ning Xuema was lucky to have eaten the pot of meat, which was enough to resist the cold. The heat flow in his body and the ice flow on the cloud bed suddenly collided. The feeling was indescribably uncomfortable. It was obviously extremely cold, but sweat was dripping from her forehead. Fortunately, Ning Xuema was very resilient. She closed her eyes and endured it. She also used another method to adjust the ice flow and heat flow. Time passed by. She didn't know how long it had been. Under the adjustment of her method, the hot and cold flow suddenly merged together. At the same time, her body emitted a light green light. Ning Xuema looked inside her body at the spiritual root in her sea of qi. She saw that the green spiritual root, which represented the wood element, had grown into a sparkling green jade. Level 9. She was at level 9. Ning Xuema almost jumped up. Merry Christmas to all the readers. Dear readers, please vote for me. Chapter 792. Ning Xuema liked it so much that she even spun a few rounds on the spot. Her curtain-like long hair flowed along with her movements. She was as beautiful as a mountain spirit. After she finished spinning, she suddenly realized that she was not wearing any clothes. Luckily, she was the only one here. Even if she danced here, no one would see her. After all, her original body was a 21 or 22-year-old girl. She usually suppressed it, but now that she was happy, she burst out with the young girl's nature. She simply spun and danced here. She was dancing the tango dance that she liked the most in her era. She twisted her waist and swayed her hips. Her movements were skillful and explosive. She even hummed a song that matched the beat. She was very happy. Amidst the layers of green Buddha lotuses, there was a lotus throne that was made up of countless Buddha lotuses. Shinjili sat on it with his eyes closed. A white fog surrounded him and spun around him. He was obviously meditating to recover, and the spiritual energy of the Buddhist lotuses here helped him recover much faster. He originally found that this place gathered the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and was a good place to cultivate. However, every time he came here he felt uneasy and couldn't calm down. Therefore he rarely came here to recover and cultivate. This time, after he gave the main hall to Ning Xuema, he didn't want to be too far away from her, so he chose to come here to recover. Maybe it was because he knew that she was in the main hall not far away. This time, when he meditated here again, his mood was very stable and he entered into a meditative state in an instant. He could already do whatever he wanted when he entered a meditative state. He would wake up when the time ended. When he woke up 4 hours later, he calculated that she should have finished cultivating on the cloud bed and was about to enter the next step. He raised his hand and the water under the lotus platform rose up and formed a water mirror in front of him. The image in the water mirror gradually became clearer. When he saw the person in the mirror clearly, his body swayed and he almost fell off the lotus platform. The beautiful person in the mirror was dancing. Her movements were enchanting and bold. He had never seen such a charming spirit before. Was eye-catching. Shenjiuli's finger that was holding the water mirror trembled. Splash. With a sound, the water mirror turned into waves and fell into the lake. This bold and impudent girl. She actually danced this kind of dance naked in the main hall. Didn't she know that her actions could easily turn a person as calm as still water into a wolf? Luckily. Fortunately, this scene only fell into his eyes and no one else saw it. He calmed himself down and suppressed the surging qi and blood in his lower abdomen. He cursed in his heart and took out a white sound transmission talisman without another word. Ning Xuema was dancing to her heart's content. Suddenly, she saw the clothes she had placed beside her flashing. She was astonished. She jumped down and picked it up to take a look. A sound transmission talisman as white as snow fell out. It was this that was shining. Ning Xuema raised her eyebrows. Yelu Jing, and had given her a light green sound transmitting talisman. She had never seen this white one before. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the Almighty left it for her? Raising his hand to answer the call, he lazily said hello as if he was making a normal call. Hello, who is this? Did you have a good time? A cold voice came from the voice transmission talisman. It was the Almighty's voice. Yes, I had a good time. Ning Xuema answered casually. After answering, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She hurriedly covered her chest with her clothes and looked around in disbelief. Of course she didn't see anything like a camera, but from his tone he obviously saw everything. Haha, the Almighty saw everything. I saw it too. I saw the tickets in your pockets. Merry Christmas, dear ones. Chapter 793. Recalling her hot and sexy dance from before, Ning Xuema's cheeks turned red. Heavens, this is so embarrassing. You were peeping. Ning Xuema reprimanded him. She hurriedly put on her clothes. The other side was silent for a while before he replied, No, I was peeping. Ning Xuema was speechless. If you want to dance like that, you can dance for me when I get back. I can be your audience. Shenjiuli's voice was unhurried. Ning Xuema was speechless. God. Come and strike me with lightning. Ning Xuema's face was so hot that it could boil an egg. She quickly straightened the buttons on her clothes and looked around with lingering fear. She seemed to see his eyes staring at her from somewhere in the dark. She was obviously very embarrassed and angry, but her heart, which was originally somewhat anxious, finally calmed down. It turned out that he had been here all along and didn't just abandon her like that. Thinking that he was watching her from some unknown corner, Ning Xuema's face once again heated up. She coughed and spoke as if she was speaking to the air or to the person hiding in the darkness. Big sister is going to cultivate. I must break through to the 9th level of the human level today. She flipped her hair handsomely and flashed a charming smile. Only then did she turn around and run off to practice her martial arts. On the lotus platform, Shenjiuli swallowed a mouthful of blood. He had recovered a little, but after seeing her sexy dance, his qi and blood were unstable. If he did not go into seclusion for 4 to 5 days, his body would not be able to take it and it would not be easy for him to recover. Fortunately, he had made all the arrangements for her. Her skills were improving rapidly. Everything was going according to his plan. He could finally go into seclusion without worry. He pondered for a while and took out a black directed audio spell. Ning Xuema thought that Shenjiuli would come back at night. She waited until midnight and did not see him. If he did not come back, she could not sleep on the bed and could only sleep on the futon. Maybe he was cultivating too? After all, he was severely injured. The castle at night was magnificent, but Ning Xuema felt a little lonely. She was lost in thought for a moment, and then decided to meditate on the praying mat. The time spent cultivating seemed long and short. When she opened her eyes again, the sky was already bright. Suddenly she smelled the aroma of food. Her heart skipped a beat and she ran out. Great God! Outside, the waves of the lake gently lapped against the embankment. There was no one there. Only the small pot was still steaming. This time there was a bowl of porridge in the small pot. There were unknown flower petals in the porridge and they were abnormally bright. There was a letter beside it. She didn't know why, but she felt a faint sense of disappointment in her heart, and also wanted to laugh. What was this person doing? Acting as Miss Conk? She took out the letter and looked at it. Written on it were the cultivation techniques she needed to cultivate for the next 3 days. This was his habit. It was very refined. Ning Xuema slowly scooped out the porridge and drank it. This time the porridge tasted very good. There was a faint sweetness in the porridge. It was a taste she had never tasted before. This porridge was delicious, but she felt that something was not right. After drinking a bowl, she did not want to drink any more. She smiled at the air. "Hey, great God, thank you for the porridge." Although he did not appear, Xuema was a little disappointed, but she did not take it to heart. The most important thing for her now was to cultivate. He had also left her a guide, so she just needed to work hard. Chapter 794. She had to admit that the Great God's guide was like a cheat. In addition, the food he sent to her was obviously not ordinary food. Her cultivation was really like a sesame seed blooming. At night, she finally broke through another level. Earth Stage Level 1. She was overjoyed and simply ran to the lake and shouted, "I'm Earth Stage now. Great God, I'm Earth Stage now. Just wait for me to take you as my disciple." Haha, she was finally close to not having to find the Great God to get in through the back door. She could openly join the ranks of the Emperor's disciple. Her voice spread far and wide across the lake. It spread to the depths of the Buddha lotus. On the lotus platform, a snowy figure slowly appeared. His snowy clothes were like mist, almost dyeing the night sky. The silver mask on his face flashed with a cold luster under the moonlight. He heard the shouts coming from afar. His pair of eyes that were as dark as the night faintly flashed as he looked in Ning Xuema's direction. His eyes flashed with a touch of darkness, and his fingers under the wide sleeves slightly clenched. Another 3 days passed. In these 3 days, Shinjuli did not appear even once, but Ning Xuema could see the same food he sent to her every day. It was different every day, but its effect was very helpful to her daily cultivation. After entering the Earth Stage, Ning Xuema realized how difficult it was to increase one level. It was like playing a game. When one's level was low, it was easy to level up, and one could level up many times in a day. But the higher the level, the harder it was to level up. If an example had to be given, it would be that human stage level 8 to level 9 required 100,000 experience points, but after Earth Stage level 1 to level 2 required more than 1 million experience points. It was more than 10 times more difficult. In these 3 days, she cultivated day and night according to the instructions given to her. On the last day, she barely broke through Earth Stage level 2. She was so tired that she almost vomited blood. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, she finished cultivating and opened the door. A paper crane bumped into her arms. Playing the messenger pigeon game again? Ning Xuema opened the paper crane. There were only 2 cold words on it: leave. The words were written like dragons flying and phoenixes flying. Ning Xuema paused for a moment, and finally remembered that today was the day of the competition between the new disciples of the Sun Moon sect. He wanted her to leave because he wanted her to participate in the competition, right? She turned around and looked at the cloud bed. When she came here a few days ago, the scene of her sharing a bed with him on the cloud bed flashed through her mind. From the moment she chose to be his disciple instead of his concubine, he seemed to have left to avoid arousing suspicion. However, the cultivation tutorial that he gave her was indeed excellent. According to what he said, she would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. He was indeed the best master he could ever ask for. It seemed like she had made the right decision. Ning Xuema inwardly sucked in a breath of air. She once again surveyed the surroundings before turning around to leave. It was cold and cheerless outside, just like in the past. She was alone. Speaking of which, weren't those jellyfish only venerable sovereigns able to walk? Then how was she going to leave? Perhaps the ancestor had left a path for her? Ning Xuema looked around and finally found a long thread that was not much thicker than a strand of hair in an extremely remote direction. That long thread was transparent under the sunlight and hung 3 meters above the ground. If Ning Xuema had not reached Earth Stage Level 2, she would not have been able to see it. One end of this thread was connected to the pillar of the jellyfish castle, and the other end stretched far away. Chapter 795. Could it be that this was the exit that he had prepared for her? Ning Xuema flew up as light as a feather. She used her shoe to touch the thread and tested its flexibility. The thread's flexibility was extremely high. It could support the weight of 2 people without any problem. She was still worried, so she walked back and forth a few more steps. The string swayed along with her footsteps, but it didn't seem like it was going to break. It seemed that this was really the exit. She really had to leave this place. Ning Xuema walked around the castle twice. After living here for a few days, she was actually reluctant to leave. Fortunately, Shinjioli had promised her that he would bring her here again in the future, so she did not have any regrets. She first contacted the little Qilin. This time the little Qilin responded very quickly. It was still in the Wolf Soul Forest. When it heard Ning Xuema's call, it no longer cared about piking with the Wolf King. In a flash, it dashed to the shore of Buddha Lotus Lake. Master, Master, have you come out yet? That passionate call made Ning Xuema's heart warm. Wait, I'll go out now. Ning Xuema flew up and stepped on the thin line. Following the line, she dashed forward. She was dressed in pink and glided on the thin line in the air. Her posture was beautiful, but it was also extremely dangerous. This was even more difficult than walking on a tightrope. The tightrope was taut in the air and did not sway too much. However, this thin thread was floating in the air. Especially since the lake was wide and the wind was not small, the thin thread swayed like a swing. An acrobat would at least have a safety rope when walking on a tightrope, but Ning Xuema did not have any protective equipment on her. Below her was the beautiful Buddha Lotus Lake that could kill people without leaving a trace. If she lost her footing and fell, she would probably melt into the water and not even her bones could be found. If her mental strength was not strong enough, even if she reached Earth rank level 3, she might not be able to walk on this path. However, Ning Xuema held back her anger. She treated this as another test from Shinjioli. She had encountered a few dangerous situations along the way. For example, she had almost fallen down, but she had managed to use her feet to hook onto the thin line and get back up again. Finally, she stepped on this thin line and flew across more than half of Buddha Lotus Lake, getting closer and closer to the opposite shore. From afar, she saw a figure in white standing by the lakeside. Ancestor. Before she could see his face clearly, she saw the white jade mask on his face. The little Qilin was standing far away on the side, anxiously looking at the lake. It saw Ning Xuema flying over, her sleeves fluttering as if she was flying. It was so happy that it shouted, "Master here?" "Here." The ancestor coldly glanced at it. "Shut up." Kirin shuddered and tucked its tail between its legs. This time, the ancestor's cold aura seemed to be more than enough. Ning Xuema glided very quickly on the rope. In the blink of an eye, she reached the shore. Her figure rose and jumped down from the rope, landing not far from the ancestor. She smiled and waved her sleeve. Great God! She was in high spirits and looked at the ancestor with a pair of sparkling black eyes, as if she was waiting for his praise. The ancestor's eyes flashed and looked at her from head to toe. Ning Xuema suddenly shuddered. The ancestor's eyes were cold. Moreover, it was the kind of eyes that were cold and ruthless to the bone. This gaze made her feel as if a basin of ice water had been poured on her head. Half of the excitement of seeing him ran away. Chapter 796. Earth rank level 2? Dizun said coldly. Yes. Ning Xuema smiled. The Almighty had always been cold. Although she was disappointed, she didn't take it to heart. Almighty, how's your injury? This was the thing she was most concerned about. It's okay. Dizun didn't want to talk nonsense with her. He turned and walked away. Come on. His white robe fluttered as he walked forward. Behind him, Ning Xuema paused and furrowed her brows. The Almighty had returned to his usual iceberg mode. Although this mode was common, she felt that something was wrong today. Master, you actually rose from human rank level 7 to Earth rank level 2 in just a few days. God, it's incredible. I've never heard of anyone leveling up so fast. The little Qilin circled around Ning Xuema, its face filled with excitement and pride. Ning Xuema finally calmed down a bit. Someone had seen her results. Although the other party was a beast, it was better than someone turning a blind eye. She was in a good mood as she patted its horn and praised it. Your horn has grown a lot. Little Apple, you've leveled up too, right? Little Apple was proud. Yes, I leveled up. I have one more skill. Master, I'll show it to you later. It was eager to show off. It raised its paw and shot out a water column. A wolf soul tree as thick as a bowl fell down. The skill had really improved. Ning Xuema knew how hard the wolf soul tree was. Such a thick tree couldn't be smashed down without a heavy force. She patted Kirin's head. Not bad. Good luck. Master, let's do our best together. Kirin was full of confidence. We'll come here to train in the future, right? It was still reluctant to leave. Ning Xuema's eyes lit up. Yes. She was very confident now. Only my disciple can come here to train. Do you think you're qualified? Di-Zun, who was walking in front, suddenly said coldly. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. Ning Xuema was speechless. Would he die if he didn't attack her? Could it be that he was deliberately provoking him? Ning Xuema raised her head and smiled. You'll know whether I'm qualified or not after the competition. I only accept the strongest. I won't make an exception for you. The ancestor's voice was even colder. Ning Xuema was irritated by his sarcastic remarks, and her voice turned cold. I didn't ask the ancestor to make an exception. I'll fight for it with my own ability. How much did he think she wanted to worship him? She just wanted to become stronger and get rid of her status as a concubine. The ancestor's footsteps paused slightly as he said lightly, Very well, this senior will wait and see. The group walked a few more steps and suddenly fog appeared in front of them. The fog was milky white and when it appeared, it seemed to have filled the entire world. The Di-Zun, who was walking in front, suddenly spoke again, Cultivators in this dark forest must break out by themselves. Take this as the first test I'm giving you. Remember, if you don't leave this place by 7 o'clock in the morning, you'll automatically forfeit your right to compete. Before he finished speaking, he had already disappeared into the fog. Ning Xuema was speechless. Kirin was anxious. Hey, we can't break out of here. You have to take us out. Kirin's voice was muffled and buzzing in the fog. It seemed that the fog had a suppressive effect, so its voice didn't travel very far. Of course, after Kirin's cry, the ancestor didn't return. The only thing around them was the fog, which made it impossible for them to see clearly. Even the trees in the fog couldn't be seen clearly, and only a few branches could be seen occasionally. They looked like strange snakes spreading in the fog. Chapter 797. Maze Mirage. This should be the maze mirage that even Yi Qingwan couldn't break out of. When Yi Qingwan became his disciple, she had Earth Stage Level 3 psychokinesis. This was the weakest that he said, and he needed to personally bring her out. Now Ning Xuema was only Earth Stage Level 2, and she cultivated urgently. Her actual power should be much lower than Yi Qingwan's at that time. But Di-Zun left her here. It was already Yinshi, which meant that she still had 4 hours. 4 hours for her to break through such a difficult situation? You really thought highly of her. Little Apple, have you been here these past few days? Ning Xuema took a deep breath and stabilized her mind. Since it was called Maze Mirage, there must be some kind of array. She was good at breaking arrays, so she should be able to break out. In order to save time, she had to understand what other people knew first. This way she could save a lot of deeters. Master, I have been wandering around here for a few days trying to find a way out, but I can't find it. There seems to be a lot of paths here, but no matter which path you take, you'll end up back at the same place. Not only that, along the way there are all kinds of monsters that come in waves. It's very annoying. I have a few wounds on my body because of one of the monsters here. Ning Xuema had already seen the 2 intersecting scars on Kirin's back. The flesh was rolled up as if it was torn apart by an animal with sharp teeth and claws. It looked very dangerous. When she met the little Qilin earlier, she had treated it without batting an eyelid. Now there were already signs of recovery. What kind of animal is that? Are there many of them? Many. Every time there are 7 or 8 of them. Those things look very strange. They have the head of a tiger, the body of a leopard, and the claws of a lion. They move like the wind and are as fast as lightning. It is impossible to guard against them. Every time I meet them, I can only run away. I can only get rid of them by hiding at Buddha Lotus Lake. Kirin told her everything it knew. It was very worried. Master, we can't get out by ourselves. Before it finished speaking, a long and sharp whistle came from the depths of the fog. Kirin's scales exploded. They are here. That's them. The thick fog in front of them surged like waves, and a few beams of golden light flickered within the thick fog. Kirin suddenly stood in front of Ning Xuema in a protective posture. 8 heads. These were their eyes. Master, run. I'll cover you. Before it could finish its sentence, it felt a breeze on its back, and a figure pounced toward the golden lights. Little Apple, sometimes you have to charge forward, you can't retreat. These were the words Ning Xuema left for Kirin. The roars of the monster and Ning Xuema's shouts resounded in the thick fog. The fog seemed to be stirred up by some kind of whirlwind rolling madly. He had to charge forward and could not retreat. Kirin was struck by these words. It was stunned for a moment. Then, with a roar, it charged at the monsters. All kinds of roars and sounds of fighting could be heard from the thick fog. About 15 minutes later, the sounds of fighting finally disappeared. Kirin looked at the scattered corpses of the monsters and looked at Ning Xuema with admiration in its eyes. So cool. His master was so cool. Kirin knew how powerful these monsters were. Their bodies were made of copper and iron, and normal attacks could not hurt them at all. Moreover, they also knew earth element spells. Coupled with their fast movements, they had once made Kirin suffer a lot. Chapter 798. The power of one of these monsters was equivalent to an Earth Stage Level 1 cultivator. When these monsters attacked together, their power and destructive power could not be underestimated. Even an Earth Stage Level 4 cultivator would have to fight for a long time against these monsters. They might even be injured a few times before winning. But its master was only an Earth Stage Level 2 cultivator, yet she could easily deal with them. In a short period of time she used all of her power. Coupled with her crafty footwork, her movements were like a phantom. Every strike was like thunder, and every strike would definitely cause a monster to fall. All of the monsters fell to the ground. Ning Xuema floated in the air. Her red dress was especially eye-catching in the white fog. In her palm was an emerald green long sword, with drops of blood slowly dripping from the tip of the sword. At this time she had an unprecedented domineering and sharp aura. To have such a master, Kirin only had one word in its heart: pride. It suddenly felt its blood boil. Master, we will definitely be able to break out. Ning Xuema smiled. Yes, she also believed in it. She immediately began to study this maze illusion array and brought the little Qilin into the thick fog. Kirin was right. There were many monsters hidden in the fog. There were all kinds of monsters and they would jump out to attack from time to time. Moreover, their power and abilities were getting stronger and stronger. Ning Xuema and Kirin dealt with wave after wave. They gradually became tired and forced. Fortunately, Ning Xuema's sense of direction was very strong. She also knew how to break all kinds of arrays, so they did not take any detours. Unlike Kirin, they did not take a detour back. In the battle with the monsters, Ning Xuema was injured. Her arm was pierced by the fangs of a monster that looked like a bear. Blood dyed her entire sleeve. Of course, that bear did not have it easy either. She hit its weak point and it was split in half. Kirin was also injured. There were several crisscrossing wounds on his body. Although the depth of the wounds were different, each wound was bleeding. The most serious wound was so serious that the white bone could be seen under the muscles. Bloody battle. It was truly a bloody battle. Every minute and every second she and Kirin were racing against death, side by side with the god of death. As for the sovereign, he didn't show up again. After killing this group of ferocious monsters, Ning Xuema began to quickly treat her and Kirin's wounds. Kirin looked at her bloody sleeve and felt both distressed and angry. Finally he couldn't help but say, "Ancestor is really cold. To think that you risked your life to save him. How dare he treat us like this? Does he really want us to die?" Ning Xuema's fingers, which were bandaging her wound, paused for a moment. Her face was a little pale. She pursed her thin lips and said, "It was a test." She could only explain it in this way, even though she almost didn't believe it herself. The gentleness in the Castle of Dreams was like a dream, dissipating as soon as he came out. He had returned to being the cold-blooded and heartless sovereign. Was this his revenge for her not wanting to be his concubine? Or perhaps he really didn't want to accept him as a disciple. A test? He wanted her to risk her life to test him? No. There seemed to be something wrong. The sovereign that appeared this time seemed to be different from the one she usually saw. Ning Xuema suddenly clenched her fists and transmitted her voice to Kirin. "Do you feel that the sovereign has changed? It's like a different person?" Chapter 799. Kirin was stunned. He thought for a moment and nodded, "Yes, a little. I thought he had some human feelings before, but after recovering from his injury he didn't even have any. His aura is also cold, so cold that it makes people shiver." He remembered that he had heard his master's call and rushed out of the dark forest. When he suddenly saw the ancestor standing by the lake, he was overjoyed and ran over to greet him. "Ancestor, have you recovered from your injury?" He thought that with the ancestor's attitude towards him and his master these days, he would at least reply. Unexpectedly he just glanced at him coldly. This glance was as cold as ice and almost froze Kirin's heart. Animals were the most sensitive, especially Kirin. When he saw the ancestor like this, he automatically moved away from him. "Master, did you offend him when you were healing?" This was the only thing Kirin could think of. Ning Xuema shook her head slightly. Her last conversation with him could not be considered as offending him. She suddenly thought of a problem. When the ancestor disguised himself as Han Shangyue and accompanied her, it seemed that the ancestor went to Blue Sea country and was a guest there. Because of this, she ruled out the idea that Han Shangyue was the ancestor. Now that she had confirmed that the ancestor was Han Shangyue, who was the ancestor who went to Blue Sea country as a guest? The ancestor's substitute? Ning Xuema once again thought of the ancestor she saw in Chang Kong country's imperial palace. The ancestor had almost frozen her into a lump of ice. He was emotionless and had no desires. Even in the summer he could still make people shiver. If she got closer she would be frostbitten by him. That ancestor and the ancestor who appeared this time were very similar in temperament, as if they were the same person, but there were some differences between him and the ancestor who was healing in the dream castle. Could there really be two ancestors? Generally, it was not too surprising for a super big shot to make a substitute to confuse the public. The ancestor was probably the same, so it was reasonable for him to make a substitute. Then there was the question. Which of these two ancestors was the real one? Which one was the substitute? The one who transformed into Xinjiuli and repeatedly entangled with her, the one who took liberties with her on the White Tower, the one who fell into the dark forest with her and got injured, the one who healed with her in the Castle of Dreams? All of these should be the same person. Xinjiuli, the name that made her feel familiar and intimate, Xinjiuli. And the person who appeared in the vast sky country's imperial palace, as well as the person who was treating her like a stranger, should be another person. Although his aura was also very strong and even colder than Xinjiuli's, Ning Xuema still felt that his aura was not as strong as Xinjiuli's. Xinjiuli's strength came from his bones, but this venerable sovereign's strength was more like a deliberate act. They gave Ning Xuema the feeling that they were authentic and high-quality imitations. No matter how good the imitation was, in the eyes of people who were familiar with the brand, it was still a fake. They couldn't compare to him either. Then, if she guessed correctly, Xinjiuli should be the ancestor. This person should be a substitute. Moreover, this substitute was also not simple. Whether it was martial arts or intelligence, it must be extremely profound. Originally, she and the ancestor accidentally fell into this place, but now the ancestor disappeared and the substitute appeared. Was this substitute summoned by the ancestor, or did it appear on its own? Why did the ancestor disappear inexplicably? Ning Xuema thought of Xinjiuli's injuries and his actual weakness. Did something happen to Xinjiuli? Chapter 800. Ning Xuema felt as if a fire was burning in her heart. Countless thoughts spun around in her mind. She took a deep breath and sent these messy thoughts away. Now was not the time to think about these things. She had to get out first. Only when she got out could she find out the truth. She shook her head. Stop talking nonsense and save your energy. Let's go. They had already killed 5 waves of monsters. If her calculations were correct, there should be another wave of monsters waiting for her. Moreover, it was a big boss. After defeating the boss, they should be at the exit. Ning Xuema calculated the time in her heart. More than 2 hours had passed. She had to move faster. She didn't have to become Di Zun's disciple, but she wanted to prove herself. She longed for an absolute victory. After walking for a while, the thick fog in front of them suddenly turned black. The surrounding air instantly became cold and the ground beneath their feet shook. A gloomy and cold air came from the black fog. An extremely dull roar that could make one's soul tremble could be heard. Ning Xuema gripped the hilt of her sword tightly. She knew that the final big boss was about to appear. She could either kill it and get out, or she and Kirin would die in its hands. There was no third choice. When enemies met on a narrow path, the brave would win. She was going to fight. A huge monster that was like a mountain slowly appeared in the thick fog. A waterfall hung outside the green mountains. An ink peak was hidden among the green bamboos. A waterfall, a bamboo forest, and an ink peak. Below the ink peak, beside the waterfall, was an open field. There were 30 young men and women standing on the field. All of them were between 13 and 14 years old. Some were handsome, some were elegant, some were cold and arrogant, and some were in high spirits. Although there was still a hint of childishness in their eyes, they were like treasured swords that had just been unsheathed. There was a hint of sharpness in their eyes. These people were the Sun Moon sect's primary disciples who had just been selected. They came from different countries and different places. These people were all geniuses in their countries. Their talents were astonishing, and they were crowned with the title of Heaven's Pride. They were the elites of the elites, the best of the best. They were all people who were cherished and nurtured by the local people or officials. It was inevitable that they would have an air of arrogance and a domineering air about them. They had already been here for 10 days. Although they had yet to officially compete, they had already experienced both open and covert competition in private. The winner beamed with joy while the loser remained silent. Gradually they were divided into different grades and ranks. Among these people, there were two outstanding figures who were most likely to be accepted as Dizun's disciples. A young man and a young woman. The young girl's name was Feng Jiesun. She came from the Fengyi country and didn't come from a high family. Her parents were commoners and she was born with metal and earth spiritual roots. The metal spiritual root was the main spiritual root and the earth spiritual root was the secondary spiritual root. There were many people who had dual spirit roots, but very few of them had dual spirit roots that coexisted with each other. Especially since she possessed two pure spiritual roots. At such a young age, his metal spirit root had already reached earth rank level 5, and his earth spirit root had also reached earth rank level 2. When she was 5 years old, her extremely high talent was discovered. When she was 10 years old, the Empress of the Fengyi country took her into the imperial palace and adopted her. She was born young, and the Empress bestowed upon her the imperial surname of Feng. She was also sent a psychokinesis master to teach and nurture her. Her food and clothing were even more high-end than those of a real princess of the Fengyi country. It was also because of her that her parents and clansmen ascended to the heavens with her, each receiving a reward from the Empress. Chapter 801. Feng Jiesun's talent had already surpassed Ji Yunhuang's. This kind of amazing talent not only made her famous in her own country, but also in the whole continent. Who knows how many sects wanted to recruit her into their sect. If she wanted to join the continent's strongest sect, the Sun Moon sect was naturally her first choice. She had always regretted that the ancestor didn't accept female disciples, causing her to miss out on a good teacher. Feng Jiesun's original plan was to become Yelu Jing An's disciple, then painstakingly cultivate to become the strongest disciple, so that the ancestor could see her and remember her, even if he only looked at her once. She didn't expect that the ancestor would make an exception and accept disciples in advance. Moreover, there was no restriction on gender. To her this news was definitely good news. Her goal of becoming the ancestor's disciple immediately shifted to him. She was determined to become the ancestor's disciple this time and shine in the Sun Moon sect. She was also one of the best among this group of new disciples. She was the most promising female disciple to become the ancestor's disciple. As for the youth, he came from the Feixing kingdom. His name was Helian Xiao and his talent was also very amazing. Coincidentally, his psychokinesis was also earth rank level 5, which was comparable to Feng Jiesun's. The difference was that he was born in a royal family and was a noble heir. He also had dual spirit roots that were mutually reinforcing. Wood and water. Wood was the main attribute, and water was the secondary attribute. His cultivation level was similar to Feng Jiesun's, and he was also the most promising person to become the champion. The Sun Moon sect's disciple who led them also thought highly of these two people, and intentionally or unintentionally took care of them. The other people's attitude towards these two people was also respectful and respectful. After all, once one of them became the ancestor's disciple, their status would be incomparably revered, and they would be able to walk unhindered on this continent. If they could curry favor with them in advance, it would be very helpful for their future cultivation. Therefore, these two people were very popular among this group of people, and when they spoke to them they were all respectful and respectful. If one wanted to become a disciple of the Sun Moon sect, just having superhuman psychokinesis wasn't enough. His or her ability to learn, to understand, to do things, to adapt on the spot, to remember. There were many abilities that needed to be tested. In these 10 days they had gone through all kinds of tests. Of course, every test would eliminate some people. After rounds of cruel competition from the original 100 people, there were only 30 left. Today was the last round of testing and it was also the most crucial round. It was a test of their courage and ability to adapt. The waterfall danced like a silver dragon, pouring into the deep pool below. Above the deep pool there was an iron chain that stretched across the two mountains. The iron chain was only as thick as a little finger and it swayed in the air. These disciples first madly spun around 100 times on the ground, and after they were done, they immediately had to walk down the thin iron chain. They did not have any protective measures on their bodies. Once they fell they would fall into the deep pool below. In the deep pool there was a flood dragon beast. Its two blood-red eyes were wide open, and its mouth was wide open as it glared at every disciple who passed by on the iron chain. They would form a group of 2 so that they could look after each other. Of course, they could also kick each other's feet to reduce the number of competitors. This was a test of one's courage. More than half of the test was done. 3 of the disciples who participated in the test fell into the deep pool and were swallowed by the flood dragon. The crunching sound of chewing scared the other 2 participants so much that they immediately gave up. Chapter 802. Coincidentally, through drawing lots, Feng Jiesin and Helian Xiao were in the same group. With their abilities, it should be easy for them to cross the iron chain. They didn't need to work together. The moment she knew they were in the same group, Feng Jiesin approached Helian Xiao. "Prince Helian, I want to discuss something with you." Her voice was tender and soft. Helian Xiao had a straightforward and bright temperament. "Just say it." Feng Jiesin pursed her lips slightly. "I know Prince Helian wants to compete with me for the position of Di Zun's disciple. Prince Helian sees me as a rival, right?" Helian Xiao was indeed straightforward. He straightforwardly admitted, "That's right. You're my only rival." Feng Jiesin bit her lips again. "We came here to join Sun Moon sect and bring glory to our family, not to risk our lives. My parents are already old. You know, it's not easy for a commoner family to produce a talented person. They love me like a pearl. If something happens to me, they probably won't be able to live." Helian Xiao knew Feng Jiesin's background. It was indeed not easy for a commoner girl to reach this step. What's more, she usually treated people peacefully and amiably. Unlike him, he was born with the temperament of a young master. His popularity was not as good as Feng Jiesin's. Every time Feng Jiesin saw him, she would call him Prince Helian Xiao left and right. She was very polite. In addition to her talent, Helian Xiao's impression of her was quite good. Hearing her words, he frowned. "I don't like to beat around the bush. If you have something to say, just say it." Feng Jiesin sighed and said, "With our abilities, it should be easy to cross this iron chain. However, under the condition that we're not being plotted against, once we're plotted against, we might lose our lives. So I want to ask Prince Helian Xiao for one thing. When we go up later, can we not plot against each other?" Helian Xiao's expression changed abruptly. He raised his eyebrows and said, "What kind of person do you think I am? How can I plot against my companions? Even if I want to compete with you, I'll compete openly." Feng Jiesin's brows relaxed and she smiled slightly. "Thank you, Prince Helian Xiao. When we go up later, can I ask Prince Helian Xiao to walk in front?" Helian Xiao knew that she was still on guard against him. He felt somewhat uncomfortable in his heart, but he didn't want to bicker with a girl. He nodded his head. "Why not? This young master will walk in front." He raised his head and looked at the iron chain. The iron chain was about 200 to 300 feet long. With his ability, he could rush over in the blink of an eye. Without Feng Jiesin in front of him, he could run faster. While they were talking, it was their turn to go on stage. After the 2 of them circled around 100 times, they looked at each other and stepped onto the iron chain one after another. Helian Xiao was in the front while Feng Jiesin was at the back. These 2 people's appearances were undoubtedly top-notch. At this moment they were standing on the swaying iron chain. The man was like a jade tree in the wind, and the woman was like a flower in the water. Nothing more beautiful could be imagined. After Helian Xiao stepped onto the iron chain, he slowed down a few steps. After getting used to it, he clenched his fingers and sprinted forward. Unexpectedly, Feng Jiesin's movements were not slow either. She followed closely behind him. In the blink of an eye, the 2 people walked to the middle of the iron chain. Below them was the deep pool. The ferocious flood dragon was looking at them with its mouth wide open. And it was at this moment that a sudden change happened. Helian Xiao was in the middle of sprinting when a large rock suddenly appeared on the iron chain under his feet. He was caught off guard and couldn't stop in time. He was tripped by the large rock and fell down. Chapter 803. Fortunately, Helian Xiao's reaction was very fast. Once he saw that the situation was bad, he flipped in the air and a green vine flew out from his palm and wrapped around the iron chain. He leaped up and wanted to take advantage of the momentum to jump onto the iron chain again. "Prince, I'm sorry." When he was in the air, he saw that the plain-clothed girl was still on the iron chain. A golden light flashed from her palm and directly cut off the green vine that saved his life. "Damn it. I've been tricked by her." Helian Xiao was furious, but his body was in the air and he couldn't borrow any strength. He could only watch helplessly as his body fell. There was nothing he could do. He didn't expect that he would die here today. He didn't expect that he, Helian Xiao, would become the food of this ferocious flood dragon. Before he could finish his thought, a green light suddenly wrapped around his waist. That green light suddenly pulled him and his body flew into the air like a swing. Naturally, he wouldn't let go of this rare chance to survive. He flipped in the air and finally landed on the iron chain again. Just as he stood still, his waist was released and that green light shrunk back like lightning. Helian Xiao was still in a state of shock and looked towards the direction of the green light. He was suddenly stunned. On the platform of the mountain that was connected to the iron chain stood a red-clothed girl. That girl looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. Her red clothes fluttered in the wind like fire. Beside her, there was a bloody ferocious beast with a pair of large eyes that flashed with a frightening cold light. This girl and beast seemed to have appeared out of thin air on the mountain's wall. No one present recognized them. Naturally, they were Ning Xuema and Kirin who had rushed out of the maze illusion realm. Xuema and Kirin had just experienced a fierce battle with the final big boss that appeared. This big boss monster was abnormally ferocious. If they only relied on their actual abilities, 2 Ning Xuema and 2 Kirin wouldn't be its match. Fortunately, Ning Xuema's battle experience was not ordinary. She also had a special footwork and many clever ideas. After fighting with the monster for almost 2 hours, she paid the price of her left leg being heavily injured and joined forces with Kirin to finally kill the monster. She understood that the monsters in this illusion realm were endless and would be reborn in a cycle. If she was one step slower, the exit would close again and the big boss monster that she had just killed would revive. She didn't have the ability to kill it a second time. Ning Xuema's left leg had been pierced by the monster's claw, and there were several deep and shallow wounds on her body. Blood flowed all over her body, but she didn't bother to clean it up. The moment the monster fell to the ground and the exit appeared, she brought the little Qilin with her and flew out. What she didn't realize that as soon as she and Kirin flew out, the hole closed. A persona white-clothed man appeared from the thick fog. The jade mask on his face flashed with an ice-cold luster. He looked at the hole Ning Xuema had escaped from, and a complicated light flashed through his eyes. Xiao Xiao Xiao? Xiao was Helian Xiao. I Xiao Xiao Xiao? Xiao 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 Xiao? The hill-like monster that Ning Xuema had just killed appeared on the spot. When it saw the queen of the maze illusion realm, it immediately roared and pounced on the queen of the maze illusion realm. The queen of the maze illusion realm didn't dodge. She frowned slightly and raised her finger. A white light enveloped the monster. The monster's body trembled and was instantly frozen, turning into an ice sculpture. The queen of the maze illusion realm flicked her finger again. The ice sculpture instantly shattered into powder and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 804. The monster that Ning Xuema had been fighting for almost 2 hours couldn't even last half a move against him. He got rid of it with just a wave of his hand. He lowered his eyes slightly for a moment before walking out of the hole that had opened up once again. Ning Xuema had just jumped out of the cave. Before she could see what was going on around her, she saw a man falling down from the iron chain and a fierce dragon waiting for him with its mouth wide open. Almost subconsciously, she waved her hand to release the green rope to wrap around the man and threw him up, saving his life. Naturally, she heard all kinds of low cries coming from below. Looking down, she saw a dense crowd of people. Countless faces were looking up in her direction. Because the mountain was very high, Ning Xuema couldn't see the faces of those people clearly. She only vaguely felt that they were children, 12 or 13 years old. With a gust of wind, the young man who had just fallen on the iron chain rushed towards her like a whirlwind. He was already in front of Ning Xuema. His momentum was so strong that Ning Xuema calmly took a step back. The young man bowed to her. "Thank you for your help, miss." His eyes flashed as he looked her up and down. He frowned. "You're injured. Quickly bandage it." Before his voice died away, he had already held 4 or 5 small medicine bottles in front of Ning Xuema. "This is the Heavenly Spirit Pill Jinshuang medicine." Ning Xuema was speechless. Only now did she realize that the wounds on her body were painful. She was a doctor, so she naturally knew the value of medicine. She knew that the young man in front of her was holding good medicine for treating external injuries. However, she didn't need these now. Ning Xuema carried all kinds of medicine given to her by the ancestor. After the ancestor woke up from his coma, he probably realized that Xuema wouldn't be able to survive without medicine, so he prepared a few bottles for her in case she needed them. When he and Ning Xuema met for the last time, he even put her treasures in a Chengkuan bag and gave them to her. She had just walked out of a dangerous hand-to-hand fight. Her body was full of murderous intent, and she was subconsciously on guard against people. She shook her head. No need, I have my own medicine. Just as she said this, her body swayed. She was exhausted and had lost too much blood, so she could barely hold on. Be careful. Helian Xiao couldn't help but reach out to support her. Be careful. Kiran also rushed over and knocked the young man away. She used her body to catch Ning Xuema, who had fallen to the ground. Helian Xiao was almost knocked off the platform by Kiran. He hurriedly held onto a stake to stabilize himself. Just as he was about to say something, a white light suddenly flashed on the mountain wall. A white-clothed person appeared out of thin air and stood on the platform. The wide white robe, the ice jade mask, the ink-black eyes, the long hair that draped over his shoulders, the aura that was as cold as snow and incomparably powerful. There was no one else who had this kind of temperament and this kind of dressing. Although Helian Xiao had never seen an ancestor before, he had at least heard of him. As soon as he saw the white-robed man's attire, he immediately recognized him. Overjoyed, he immediately bent over and knelt down. Ancestor. Ning Xuema also leaned on Kiran and slowly turned her head. Her gaze fell on the person who had a cold temperament and was used to being high and mighty. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. It turned out that he didn't come out early. He had been following behind her all along. It seemed that he didn't want her to die. She raised her head to look at the sun in the sky and smiled. Ancestor, it's just right now. Xuema didn't miss the time. Asking for all kinds of tickets. Chapter 805. The ancestor looked down at her but didn't say anything. Instead, he sent a message to the disciples kneeling below. Feng Liani, from now on, this Ning Xuema will also join them and compete with them. The disciple in charge of teaching these new talents was called Feng Liani. He was Yelu Jing, An's disciple. His character was quite similar to his master's. He was gentle like jade and patient with people. The training of the new disciples was basically led by him. He was lucky enough to see the ancestor twice, so he recognized him. Just now, when he saw the ancestor appear, he had already led everyone to kneel down. Hearing this command from afar, he hurriedly responded with a loud yes. Feng Liani was bewildered. The ancestor never asked about the Sun Moon sect's recruitment of new disciples, nor did he interfere. Why did he personally send someone here this time? Did the ancestor need special care for the person sent here? He wasn't the only one who had this thought. Everyone present also had this thought. Especially Feng Jiasen. She had just plotted against Helian Xiao and thought she had finally kicked off a strong opponent. She didn't expect that Ning Xuema would appear midway. And the ancestor had personally sent her. Could it be that the ancestor's disciple had already been decided? Her charming face turned green and white. Her small hands clenched into fists inside her sleeves. Just as everyone had this thought, the ancestor's voice sounded again. This time, every word was very clear. She is no different from the other participating disciples here. Treat her the same way you treat others. This time I will only accept the strongest disciple. Everyone work hard. The meaning of these words was very clear. There was no need to take care of Ning Xuema in any way. If she wanted to enter the Sun Moon sect, she had to participate in various tests. The ancestor wouldn't show any favoritism. Feng Jiasen secretly let out a sigh of relief. She boldly asked, Ancestor, this disciple has a matter to ask. But we've already gone through 6 rounds of various tests and eliminated a portion of people. Does this Miss Ning also have to go through those tests to be fair? The malice in her words was very obvious. Di Zun glanced at Ning Xuema, whose face was pale due to excessive blood loss. What do you say? Before Ning Xuema could say anything, Helian Xiao, who was kneeling at the side, hastily opened his mouth, reporting to the venerable sovereign. The first 6 tests were extremely exhausting. Moreover, each test was completed within 3 days. Everyone has time to rest, and Miss Ning is seriously injured. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for her to go through those 6 stages. Although Ning Xuema didn't know what the 6 stages were from their words, she knew that they must be very dangerous and not easy to pass. She raised her head and stared at the ancestor's face with her big eyes. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. What does the ancestor intend to do? She wanted to see what this person wanted. The ancestor's voice was indifferent. Since you want to be my disciple, you naturally have to experience things that ordinary people can't. You can't ask for special treatment from me, unless you give up on the idea of becoming my disciple. So he was forcing her to give up. Ning Xuema smiled. I've never asked for special treatment from you. I'll just go through those 6 stages. She slowly straightened her body. Suddenly she staggered and fell forward. The ancestor was standing right in front of her and was completely unprepared. He was hit by her. His eyes suddenly turned cold. Just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly thought of something. His palm that was about to send her flying paused. Just as he was hesitating, Ning Xuema got up like lightning and jumped away from his embrace. Chapter 806. I'm sorry I tripped. Ning Xuema lowered her eyes and apologized. Dizun was speechless. His snow-white sleeve was stained with her blood, which was dazzling red. His body was cold. Although there was a faint fragrance which was very similar to Shinjioli's, Ning Xuema could still distinguish the difference. Shinjioli's fragrance was naturally present, but the fragrance on the person in front of her was applied later. They were really not the same person. The person in front of her was really not him. Ning Xuema's mood was very agitated. She was only suspicious before and didn't dare to be sure. Now she was completely sure. Although she still couldn't figure out what was going on, as long as she was sure that the person in front of her was not him, it was enough. She believed that he had no choice but to leave. She believed that he would come back. She believed that Shinjioli wanted to accept her as his disciple. If the real him was here, he wouldn't bear to let her get hurt, and he wouldn't let her risk her life in the maze mirage. Since that was the case, she couldn't let him be criticized by others and leave a topic for others to talk about. She would rely on her own ability to stay. Her gaze fell on the Dizun in front of her. She knew that she absolutely couldn't expose this matter now. The real Dizun wasn't here. Even if she exposed his identity now, no one would believe her. Moreover, she might even anger the person in front of her and kill her. Dizun Xuema can fight for the 6 stages, but Xuema has a condition. She wanted to fight for the biggest rights for herself. Say it. Xuema has just broken out of the maze mirage and is seriously injured. Please give Xuema 2 hours to heal. Okay. The Dizun agreed. Her request wasn't excessive and he couldn't really force her to die. After 2 hours I will go to the 6 stages, but other people pass it in 3 days. How much time will you give me? Ning Xuema continued to ask. The Dizun obviously knew the process of the 6 stages. He said faintly, your aptitude is ordinary. If you want to be my disciple, you must have outstanding performance in other aspects to convince everyone. In the 6 tests you will have time to catch your breath, you don't need to rest. I'll give you 12 hours. If you pass all of them within 12 hours, I'll give you a chance. The expression of Helian Xiao, who was standing at the side, changed greatly. He had fought his way through the 6 stages, so he naturally knew how powerful they were. Even for someone of his level, even if he was in his peak condition, he would still need 16 hours to pass through 6 stages at his fastest speed. The premise was that he was made of iron and would not get tired. If one were to encounter a slightly slower person, they would need at least 6 to 8 hours to pass one of the stages. As for Ning Xuema, it was simply a pipe dream for her to pass the 6 stages while being seriously injured. He was born with a temper that liked to fight for justice. At this moment he couldn't help but feel indignant for Ning Xuema. If the other party wasn't a venerable emperor, he was afraid that he would coldly spit back. Now he couldn't help but tug on Ning Xuema's sleeve and transmit his voice to her. Don't agree, you won't pass. Ning Xuema nodded slightly at him, indicating that she knew what she was doing. She tilted her head and looked at the Dizun. What chance? The Dizun said, you can pass the 6 stages in 12 hours. This proves that you are indeed a genius. Even if you don't win against the others in the final round and can't be my disciple, you can still be my disciple. You can choose anyone from the Sun Moon sect. This was indeed not a small temptation. It must be known that among the new disciples, only one person could be the Dizun's disciple. The others were completely chosen by the guardian elders. Chapter 807. This time, Yelu Jing was the most outstanding disciple, and he only accepted one disciple this time. Everyone thought that Yelu Jing An's disciple would be either Feng Jiesin or Helian Xiao. They didn't expect that this quota would fall on Ning Xuema. If she could pass the 6 tests within 12 hours, she could at least become Yelu Jing An's disciple. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. Of course, the premise was that she could pass the tests within 12 hours. Ning Xuema slightly lowered her eyes. Then Xuema will be so bold as to ask again. Has there been anyone who managed to pass the 6th trial within 12 hours? The ancestor only answered her with one word, yes. Since there was it proved that it could be done by humans. If others could do it, then Ning Xuema could do it. She was about to answer when Helian Xiao transmitted his voice again. Miss Ning, the one who passed the 6 tests within 12 hours was Prince Tian Xiaoshi from 1,000 years ago. He was the most talented disciple of the ancestor. When he entered the ancestor's tutelage, he was already Earth rank level 6 and had never been surpassed. Ning Xuema's heart moved. She naturally knew about Prince Tian Xiaoshi. It seemed that the prince sealed in the stone spirit's stomach was him. The ancestor's proudest disciple, who was once a legend of the entire continent, died young. This kind of talent was one of a kind, and he still needed 12 hours to pass the tests. Ning Xuema was only Earth rank level 2, and the ancestor gave her 12 hours. It was obvious that he was making things difficult for her. The matter of accepting disciples will be decided tomorrow. It will be your real competition. If you want to join them, you must pass all the tests today. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for coming too late. Of course, you can choose to give up. The ancestor's voice was still indifferent, which meant that he wasn't deliberately making things difficult for her. Ning Xuema sneered in her heart. This person kept saying that he wasn't making things difficult for her, but in fact, he was always making things difficult for her. She didn't know what kind of deep hatred she had with him that made him treat her like this. She smiled slightly. Ancestor, can you give Xuema some time to consider? Yes. The ancestor agreed again and added, you should rest for 2 hours and think about it. When the time comes, give the results to Feng Liani directly. He will naturally report to me. He turned around and disappeared from where he stood. While Ning Xuema was talking, she had already treated her wounds quickly. Now she immediately sat down and meditated to recover. At this point, naturally, no one would think that the ancestor was biased towards Ning Xuema. He was clearly making things difficult for her. Some people looked at Ning Xuema with sympathy, while others sighed. Of course, there were also those who wanted to see her as a joke. Feng Liani finally came up. He had just seen Ning Xuema's skills. He knew that although her psyche power was low, her ability to react and perform on the spot was still remarkable. He looked at Ning Xuema with a slightly complicated gaze. Miss Ning, of the 6 trials, 3 of them are very risky. It also consumed a lot of psyche power. With your current physique, being able to pass the test in 1 day and 1 night is already a miracle, and that's under the condition that there are no accidents. Therefore, it's impossible for you to pass the 12-hour time limit. It's better to give up. If you give up, I can also accept you. His words were sincere, but Ning Xuema only faintly smiled. She thanked him but did not say anything. Feng Liani saw her like this and didn't say anything more. The match had been interrupted halfway through by this sudden incident, so naturally the match would continue. Helian Zhao's second test was naturally very easy. After he passed, he immediately ran back to Ning Xuema's side. Chapter 808. When the disciples passed by Ning Xuema, they would look at her with all kinds of gazes. Pity, ridicule, and indifference. Although they were all geniuses, they were still children after all. Children didn't know how to hide their emotions, so when they looked at Ning Xuema, the emotions in their eyes were very direct. Even the little Qilin could sense it. This made it very unhappy, very unhappy. It stared back at them one by one. Ning Xuema didn't care. She learned about the 6 tests from Helian Xiao. From him, she knew that there were 2 literary tests and 4 martial tests. The literary test tested one's memory and comprehension ability in an instant, while the martial test tested a variety of things. The mechanical test was similar to Shaolin's Mu Ren Gang. There were all kinds of things. Helian Xiao had secretly given her a brief explanation. Ning Xuema finally had a plan in her heart. She wasn't in a hurry to tell Feng Liani the final result. Instead, she seized the time to meditate and recover. It had to be said that the medicine Shinjuli gave her was excellent. In addition, her psychokinesis had reached the 2nd level of the Earth realm, so her recovery ability was much faster than before. She used the art of rejuvenation several times in succession. After an hour, the wounds on her body had already scabbed over. Her originally pale face also had a little bit of redness. Ning Xuema had already treated the little Qilin's injuries before she started meditating. The little Qilin recovered even faster. She even went down to the pond to take a bath. It was strange that when the fierce flood dragon below saw Kirin, it didn't dodge nor was it afraid. Kirin looked at the fierce flood dragon suspiciously. Seeing that it didn't provoke it, it didn't take it to heart. It recovered in the water for a while, and the wounds on its body healed faster. When it came out of the pool and returned to Ning Xuema's side, exactly an hour had passed. Ning Xuema stood up and smiled elegantly at Feng Lianyi, who was standing next to her. Please tell Dizun that I'll bet. Feng Lianyi sighed softly. Naturally, he couldn't stop them. He agreed and sent a message to the venerable sovereign. She actually wanted to challenge 6 stages within 12 hours. Almost everyone present was boiling with excitement. Everyone looked at Ning Xuema as if she were crazy. They didn't understand where her confidence came from. Helian Xiao looked at Ning Xuema with a complicated gaze. He wanted to persuade her again. Miss Ning? Ning Xuema waved her hand, indicating that he didn't need to say anything more. At the side, Feng Jessen suddenly sighed faintly. Miss Ning, you're the daughter of Vast Sky Empire's Marquis Ning, right? As soon as he said this, everyone present was shocked. Ning Xuema had caused a lot of trouble recently. She had already gained a great reputation in Jianghu. Most of the well-informed people on this continent knew about her. The world's #1 trash, the 6th prince broke off the engagement. The crown prince protected her. She was conferred the title of beast concubine. She subdued the extremely rare Qilin beast. The venerable sovereign personally said that she was a 1,000-year lonely phoenix, and she was taken in by Han Shanyue as a concubine. In just a few months, her fate had been up and down, giving the continent a lot of topics to talk about. Of course, the evaluation of her was more negative than positive. There were even some who directly said that she was a disaster, a fox spirit. She didn't have much ability, but her luck was very good, and she was very good at confusing men. Just now, although the venerable sovereign said her name, her title as the world's #1 trash had already been deeply rooted in people's hearts. No one would have thought that such a person could also enter the Sun Moon sect. They naturally wouldn't think that this Ning Xuema was Ning Xuema. Chapter 809. Therefore, when Feng Jessen said this, all the boys and girls present widened their eyes in shock. Helian Xiao took a step back. You are really Ning Xuema, the daughter of Marquis Jingyuan? Ning Xuema glanced at Feng Jessen with her bright eyes. This little girl's little scheme was nothing in her eyes. The reason she exposed Xuema's identity was to embarrass her, that's all. She smiled. There's only one Ning Xuema in this world. There's only this one and no other. The sentence was so domineering. The crowd buzzed again, obviously shocked by her. All kinds of discussions were incessant. A girl couldn't help but say, I remember that Marquis Ning's daughter is a psychokinesis trash. She can't even cultivate psychokinesis. Why is she here? This question was unavoidably sharp. Ning Xuema lightly smiled. Suddenly, she closed in on her and grabbed her belt with lightning speed. With a whirlwind dance, she threw her out. Her movements were too fast and too urgent. Everyone simply couldn't react, and the girl who was thrown didn't even have time to react. By the time she reacted, she was already in midair. Below her was a deep pool of water. The girl's body fell down, and she was so scared that her soul almost left her body. She screamed involuntarily. Just as she screamed, a green light flashed and wrapped around her waist, forcibly pulling her back. The girl flew back to the platform as if she was riding the clouds. She staggered and almost fell down. A small hand patted her shoulder. Stand firm. With this back and forth, the girl was so scared that her face turned green. She looked at Ning Xuema as if she had seen a ghost. She said in a trembling voice, You, Ning Xuema was calm and composed. How does it feel to be saved by a trash after being thrown out? That girl? Ning Xuema's display of her small hand simply shocked everyone present. Those whispering about how such a piece of trash had managed to sneak into the Sun Moon sect automatically stopped all voices of injustice. Ning Xuema used her actions to give these people who looked down on her and called her a good-for-nothing a slap in the face. Regardless of how strong her psychokinesis was, her speed and her kung fu had already placed her in the ranks of experts. What's more, some of the sharp-eyed people had noticed that the green rope that she had thrown out earlier was a result of her casually condensing the wood element. This kind of skill could only be achieved by someone whose wood psychokinesis had reached Earth rank level 2 or above. In other words, her psychokinesis was definitely not trash. It had already reached Earth rank level 2. And Earth rank level 2 was naturally not eye-catching in the Sun Moon sect, even if almost all of the newcomers present had a higher psychokinesis value than her. However, she was different. Just a few months ago, she was still a psychic trash that everyone looked down on. To be able to cultivate to such a level in just a few months was simply an inconceivable miracle. With her cultivation speed, wouldn't she be able to surpass everyone present very soon? Everyone looked at her with even more complicated gazes, but this time, it was mostly surprise and worship. Feng Jessen's expression changed slightly. She originally didn't put Ning Xuema in her heart, but now she felt a strong sense of crisis. She didn't expect that this Qing Yaojin, who had jumped out halfway, not only saved her opponent, but was also her opponent. Too infuriating. Her fists in her sleeves were clenched tightly. Looking at Ning Xuema, she suddenly smiled gently. So it really is Miss Ning. Jessen has heard of Miss Ning's great name like thunder. She said a long string of polite words. Chapter 8:10. Feng Jessen changed the topic. A few days ago, I heard that you married Master Han Shanyue as a concubine. It can be said that you have someone to rely on for your whole life. However, coming to the Sun Moon sect to learn from a master, you can only be a virgin. This is really a pity. Although she said it was a pity, she didn't mean it at all. She was obviously telling everyone that Ning Xuema was no longer a virgin. She didn't even have the qualifications to enter the Sun Moon sect, let alone become the disciple of the emperor. Helian Xiao was originally very unhappy because he was schemed against by her just now. At this moment, seeing her expose Ning Xuema's background, he was even angrier. If he was angry at her unscrupulous means before, now he had already started to despise her character. Feng Jessen. Don't go too far. Feng Jessen looked innocent. How am I going too far? I only regret that Miss Ning can't enter the Sun Moon sect and become a disciple of the same sect as us. Ning Xuema glanced at Feng Jessen. The little girl was very beautiful, with a kind of light and graceful aura. What a pity for such a good appearance. Such a young white lotus and such a high level. She laughed and looked Feng Jessen up and down. She said indifferently, "Who are you? Do I know you?" Feng Jessen's little face changed slightly. Ning Xuema's aura was too strong. A short sentence seemed to squeeze out the little in her bones. She couldn't help but raise her head and put on an imposing manner. This princess is Feng Jessen. She believed that her name was spread all over the continent, so Ning Xuema must have heard of her. I don't know you. Ning Xuema answered directly. Feng Jessen. She was choked. Ning Xuema changed the topic and smiled. However, I know you now. Just now, the one who schemed against your companion was you, right? Feng Jessen. After all, she felt guilty in her heart. At this time, being exposed in front of everyone, she became angry from embarrassment. What companion? The competition has rules that we can use all kinds of methods to eliminate the opponent? So you can be unscrupulous? You could have pretended to be sympathetic to me, saying that it wasn't easy for a commoner's daughter to climb to this step, that you still have an old mother waiting for you to return home, that you can't die, and that when you discuss with me, we can't scheme against each other. Helian Xiao sneered at the side. Actually, many people had seen Feng Jessen plotting against Helian Xiao, but because of the competition's rules, no one felt anything. What they didn't expect was that Feng Jiaxan had begged them to be lenient, but in the end she went back on her words and schemed against them. This method was too despicable. When everyone looked at Feng Jessen again, their gazes were somewhat strange. Feng Jessen blushed. I didn't. It's clear that you discussed it with her to say that about me. I know that one of you is the daughter of a marquis and the other is the son of a prince. Looking down on ordinary people like us. Do you think you can join forces to slander a commoner girl like me? She was on the verge of tears. Her eyes were watery and she looked as if she had suffered a great grievance. You. Helian Zhao's handsome face also turned red. This was really a typical drama of the weak bullying the strong. Ning Xuema sneered slightly. She had obviously done something bad, but she denounced the strong with the identity of the weak, stripping the sympathy of the public, making the strong unable to speak. This girl was very skilled in using this wicked method. It seemed that she had used it more than once. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.